evening. The Wednesday, February 12th, 2025 Conservation Commission meeting will come to order. It is now after 7 p.m. First order of business will be the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you all. Next item is going to be the approval of minutes, January 8th and January 22nd. I'm looking for a motion from any member of the commission.
Well, I reviewed the minutes for January 22nd, and I move that those be approved as drafted.
I have a motion and second on January 22nd. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That's unanimous. Apparently January 8th is not ready to go.
They were distributed.
I don't know if anyone was able to review them or not. We can table them.
I was absent from that meeting, so I didn't review that. We'll get them next time.
I reviewed them,
We'll table January 28th,
Okay.
and we'll move on to small projects. NACC number 341, 265 Granville Lane, Quality Home Design.
All right. The small project is an in-kind replacement of a front deck and stairs that services the front of the house. It's 173 square feet altogether, including the stairs. It's tucked, in an L of the house. Based on field measurements that we made, it's 52 feet from the wetland that is associated with a small intermittent stream that daylights out of a culvert. New footings are proposed, but the work site is fairly contained. The driveway is right there for stockpiling and materials management. And so I would recommend approving it under a category B, and then voting to approve the project with conditions that require a pre-construction meeting with conservation staff and the contractor, just to ensure that we're all on the same page. I don't think erosion controls are necessary, just the way the slope is. And then a post-construction inspection to verify compliance.
Okay. Joseph?
Just where it's 52 feet and the shape of the lot that's improved, somewhat irregularly shaped, that 52 is the closest point? That
Yes,
wetland
it
doesn't
is.
come up the
It's
side at all?
Yes, it's the closest
Okay.
point.
I'm all set.
How sure are you of the wetland line in that closest point?
Oh, that's fairly obvious. It's basically bank, because there's really no much of a fringe BBW at that point.
Okay, so you're very comfortable with that
Yeah,
setback?
we walked it, and yeah, that's the
Okay,
closest.
I have no other question.
No questions. No questions. We ready for a motion?
I move that we approve the small project under category B for 265 Granville Lane with conditions as stated by administrator.
Motion and second. Any further discussion? There being none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, and that's unanimous on the small project. (2421058) Certificate of Compliance, 20 Nutmeg Lane, lot number 13, Robbins, continued from 1/22/25.
Alrighty, Commission will recall discussing this COC request, and the order involved demolition of an existing house and reconstruction of a new single-family house. There were some non-compliant features on the property that needed to get addressed, so the Commission tabled the request, asked for a restoration plan of the 25-foot no disturb zone, removal of a section of fence that's on the side of the house, and installation of a riprap apron for a driveway drain that drained into the 25. We gave them a couple of continuances to try to coordinate between the seller and the new homeowner. It wasn't quite coming together as fast as I think we'd like or I'd like, so I told them that I was going to recommend that you deny the request for a certificate of compliance and just issue an enforcement order requiring the restoration plan and all the things that we asked for originally. And they were fine with that, basically. And I left it to them if they wanted representation at the meeting, and they didn't, no one was going to come, so I told them this is what was going to happen. So that's my recommendation. So I just provided some more detail on, restoration plan, removal of the mulch, preparation for planting, native plant schedule and seed mix, installation of the stone apron at the drainage discharge point, and removal of the section of fence on the, I think it's the north side of the house. And I thought that we should have a deadline for submittal of that proposed plan, maybe at the end of March, at our last meeting in March, and then a deadline for its execution at the end of June. So that's,
Okay.
Joe?
Oh, it's pretty clear. I'm all set.
Yeah, it seems like we asked them to do some things.
they are coordinating. The previous homeowner, the seller, has given Steve Stupinski authority to hire Norse Environmental to start preparing the plan. So things are in motion, but I think it took the nudge to get it going. So I think the enforcement order is going to do that
Okay,
to keep the progress.
that's good that that's moving forward. I'm all set.
Seems like a good plan. All set. All set, thank you.
So what do you want us to
So,
do? What are you looking for?
To make a motion to deny the request for a certificate
You
of
want that first?
compliance.
Okay.
So moved.
Motion and a
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? None. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That's unanimous. It is denied.
I'll offer the second motion. That we direct the agent to issue an enforcement order based on the findings of the request for certificate of compliance showing that it was not in compliance, and to return the property to compliance in accordance with the 5 bulleted items that we have here, with the deadlines.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? None. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And that's unanimous. Just for the record, I'm not voting unless, unless there's a tie. Okay. All right. Under COCs, we have 242-1045, a partial COC request, 430 Osgood Street, North Andover High School.
Alrighty. So, as a high-level background, in March of 2001, an order of conditions was issued for the reconstruction and expansion of the high school building, reconfiguration of the campus, including parking, fields, landscaping, and stormwater management. Wetland fill and replication was part of the project for construction of the main entrance off of Osgood Street. In February of 2004, the order was amended for northerly and southerly playing field redesign and paving of tennis courts. In June of 2017, a partial certificate of compliance was issued associated with the synthetic turf fields located at the lower fields, the stadium and practice field, and at the track. Limited as-built plans were provided with that request. And then I believe at that same meeting, a request for determination of applicability was considered for allowing replacement of the existing synthetic turf carpets in both of those northerly and southerly fields. And it was approved after the partial certificate was issued. requests for full certificates of compliance were made in 2018 and 2023 that were denied for the lack of as-built plans. Since then, we've had some discussions with town management on a path forward, considering that the high school is preparing to do a fields project at the baseball diamond and the tennis courts, and other track and field improvements. What we needed is a request for a partial certificate of compliance for them to work within the footprint that they are proposing with the new fields. So we have as-built plans, existing conditions plan provided by Fuss and O'Neill. And what I am in the midst of doing is working with John Bergese and his engineering team to do the comparison between existing and proposed. They have the CAD files and they're working on that right now. It's just not ready right now. But consultants from Gale Associates are here if you have questions. But I think in the end, we're going to need to continue.
So just so I have it clear in my mind, we're not, we can conduct a hearing, but we're not prepared to close it at this time. We're not, all right, then, you guys are aware of that?
We are now.
Pardon me?
Oh, yeah, no, I'm still working with John Bergese on that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But we're not going to close on the Fields project tonight either, so it really doesn't matter. I mean, I think they can still, remain on the same track. Yeah.
So with that in mind, you have the floor if you want it.
Yeah. Okay.
I believe the administrator covered it quite well. I'll just state for the record and introduce ourselves. My name is Kyle Rowan. I'm the project manager with Gale Associates, and I have with me tonight my colleague Ryan Thackeray. He is our senior designer. We'll be speaking on behalf of the overall high school project after this, but with respect to this partial certificate of compliance, yes, it was our understanding, as directed by the conservation administrator, that we would provide the existing conditions plans that were produced as part of the upcoming high school project. So the existing conditions plans that you see on the screen now are specific to the 4 areas across the high school parcel that will be subject to improvements based on the forthcoming project intended for construction this summer. So that is the limit of that topographic as-built. One thing of note is that we did get the wetlands, the bordering vegetated wetlands around this site flagged as a part of that process. So this as-built, while intended to satisfy as-built requirements for the 2001 and amended 2004 orders of conditions, you do actually have updated wetland delineation on these sections of topographic survey. But other than that, I think just for our understanding, we did submit this application along with the checklist. There are 2 items on that checklist, well, really 1 item on that checklist that we could not check off, which is the letter from a registered professional engineer or land surveyor certifying compliance with the order of conditions. As Gale Associates was not the primary engineer of record on the 2001-2004 high school project, we cannot certify that, and therefore that's why the administrator is pursuing that with the town. And that's pretty much the context.
Joe?
Kind of on the fence between saying nothing, because I don't have anything substantial to sink my teeth in, but the little bit that I've tasted here doesn't taste too good. By reviewing some advanced information we received for the high school project itself, there were some test pits and some soil geotechnical work done. And I call into question the validity of anything when I see one of the test pits that was advanced in an area where the findings were soil horizons that look to be described to be, in situ, natural occurring, yet they found a wire buried at a depth, and they weren't certain, quote unquote, if it fell from above. But if anybody just simply took the very same Google Earth photograph, aerial photograph that they have, and pushed it back to where the old high school was. Test pit number 3 is under the old building. Did they not know that that's where the building was demolished, and the findings that there's a wire at depth might be the old facility? So I call into question just, one tiny little tidbit that kind of really pollutes in my mind just the methodology being used here. And so I think I'm going to go back to my original position. I have nothing to say because I have nothing to review.
Yeah, so we're still reviewing, comparing the plans, and just verifying that as Amy stated. I would request, in this meeting that part of that process be identifying some of the items that need to be resolved, okay? One of the sheets has the corner of a shed that we believe is a violation. It should be identified, it should be shown in total and identified, and these were discussed, but those should be identified as to be removed. Okay, there's the shed there, and then there was a parking area also that we believe is a violation. That should be shown in total and identified and called out as to be removed and restored as part of the PCOC, because those are violations right now, and they're existing violations, and to issue a PCOC with violations shown on the plan is not something that we should be doing and that we generally do.
So, when you say they should be called out as violations to be restored under the new NOI and order of conditions, would you want that like on the as-built plan to indicate that it's going to be addressed under a separate filing? Is that, I just want to make sure I understand what you mean.
Yeah, it's a situation we're not in very often.
I know.
But, when I looked at this, well, first of all, we agreed that, the project would remove those violations in the meetings that we had, so I'm going with that. And to give a partial certificate of compliance with violations,
Yeah.
shown on the plan, I don't think it would be consistent with what we should be doing. I think a compromise would be, and this is just a suggestion, just my suggestion, that we identify those as to be removed.
Okay.
We could say by the baseball field project or whatever this is called, but
Right.
We should show that we're not giving a partial certificate of compliance with existing violations that aren't addressed. So I think we should at least communicate that to the project, which we have, but this would be a formal communication. And then, beyond that, again, the review of the plans, the comparisons that you guys are doing, the technical stuff you guys are doing, just continue on with that. It may uncover some new things, but I don't know. But at least we know those two things that should be identified and identified for removal and brought into compliance.
Just to follow up on that, so I make sure I understand this clearly. The gentleman from Gale mentioned that they have the checklist that they've gone through and checked everything they could certify to,
Right.
with the exceptions of those things that they couldn't certify to, then signed it at the bottom. I believe it's stamped, right? But did they specifically point out where it's not compliant, like these areas? Because they have to.
No, that's,
So we need a new checklist too, and we need a new certification that says as much.
right. Well, let me just explain that in our discussion with Gail and town management, that Gail was not going to certify anything in terms of compliance with the old order of conditions.
I don't know what kind of negotiations went on, but, I mean, if you've got a document that's being attached to a partial certificate of compliance, speaking to the compliance in that part of the site, that partial piece of the site, we expect everybody who comes before us to tell us where it deviates, and then we can decide whether it's significant or not. The document doesn't show that. How the hell can we act on any of it?
Well, I'm going to tell you the truth. I was asked by town management to do that, and the only way I can do that is help with our engineering department. So that's
Right.
how it came down.
But I think a drawing prepared and presented that shows non-compliance, how could they not certify to that? How could they not say the shed is too close? How can they say that the parking lot is too close or not too close? It's there, it's on their drawing. By virtue of us voting on it, we're de facto accepting it as being compliant. I don't want to fall into that trap, which is what it seems like. So I think that you not only update the drawings, at the very least, we need a certification that says these areas are not in compliance. And I'm not asking for the whole site, which we are talking about in a bigger picture. Even specific to the area they're working now, we need to act on that and need to know that it's not in compliance and vote accordingly.
Isn't that what you're working on with Mr. Borghese? The
That's-
identifying the
that's what
areas that are
we're-
non-compliant?
that's-
Isn't that
It's-
exactly what you're doing?
It's being done in-house.
So it's just not done yet. It's not ready yet, which is what Amy disclosed to us at the start of the meeting. She said we can have initial discussion, but she's still working with town engineer, and we'll have to continue. So the cookies aren't ready.
I think we're all in agreement, and we're not gonna vote on it. We're not gonna vote on it tonight.
No.
But I think I want to go so far as to say it's not just the plan that you were talking about, it's
Yeah.
the documentations that form
Right.
the file.
Right.
You know, a certification statement that is silent as to non-compliant shouldn't be silent.
So why is it not possible to get that?
Yeah.
What, in other words, we have engineers on the commission here. When an engineer stamps a plan and submits a letter accordingly, they stay, it's either in compliance or not in compliance, or it's in compliance here but not in compliance there. We've seen thousands of those letters come before us.
Right.
And they're almost all the same. That's the usual. So I guess I'm
So-
asking, why can't we get that?
That's a question for the
Yeah, we
applicant.
can.
From our perspective and from the discussions we had informally prior to this meeting, I think really what this comes down to is typically these certificates of the plans being in compliance are completed, the partial certificate of compliance or the certificate of compliance application are completed by the engineer of record for the project itself. In this case, this is a project from over 2 decades ago on which Gale was not the engineer of record. The prime at that time was Dinesco, I believe, Dinesco Design Partners. So that being the case, during that discussion that we had separately with the town, it was decided that what Gale would provide is these stamped land survey, existing conditions plans of the areas subject to the proposed improvements as part of meeting the unmet as-built condition of the 2001 order of conditions.
So when he puts his stamp on that thing, that means he's saying this is gonna operate exactly as designed. If I'm in his shoes, no way I'm stamping something from 2 decades ago that I'm suspect about.
Correct.
So,
Yeah, but
I don't.
the checklist is a multi-level checklist. And the performance piece of which of the areas you refuse to stamp, to check, I understand that, I completely agree with that. You have no basis to say that. But the physical position of a building next to a wetland that clearly is in violation to the permit and doesn't show up in the original permit, yet it's silent in your checklist, shouldn't be. In the parking lot, ditto, it shouldn't be.
Yes.
We need to get you to the.
We'll take, just,
Hi, Lori Barzlaf. I'm the assistant town manager, and I one who's working with Gail, along with Greg Landry for the project. Just as a little sort of background, they were not hired to get a certificate of compliance for the high school. This didn't come up until we met with Amy to go over the project, what we had in mind, and then when we met again to discuss what you were going to require. So I think it's unfair to say that they're not doing their job, because this wasn't their job. They're actually doing this for us because we asked them to do it. We're trying to get to a point where we can solve this issue after 20 years. You know, not their fault, not our fault. I don't know how else we can come to a resolution so that we can get this project done. And every day that we delay it, unfortunately, is going to cost us more money. So just as a background information on where the town's coming from. Thank you.
Thank you.
I want to be clear that every day of delay started in 2018 when they were denied a certificate of compliance, in 2021. All those years that have gone by and all those times that they envisioned this project knowing they had non-compliant issues that they chose to ignore only made matters worse. It's not our fault of any delay. It's mismanagement of this project, and hiring Gail to do a partial job is not our fault. And to come here before us and give us a partial checklist that says it's partially compliant and wink and a nod, we want you to sign off and vote on it, is unacceptable to me.
Where did the line
This job was known to be a problem. They chose to ignore it, and we're at this 11th hour and 27 seconds to bid time, and maybe even beyond that. And it's not the Conservation Commission's fault. The town management team keeps kicking this issue down the road and refuses to ignore it, refuses to deal with it. They choose to ignore it. It doesn't work. It always comes back to be obvious. And this is it. I mean, this is exactly the situation. We've warned them repeatedly. We know high school properties are never static, they're dynamic. They just never dealt with it. And I'm not saying anybody in this room, this goes back multiple generations of management teams and individual people who just simply have not chosen to deal with it. It's not this commission's problem of timing.
Ms. Bilzer.
Yeah, I just want to clarify one thing. The town is not responsible for this. It was the school department, and it was being handled by a previous administration that's no longer here. So we're trying to get it resolved with the information that we have.
Thank you. So, as I said, Amy disclosed at the beginning of this hearing that it's not ready to close. She's still working with John Borghese. I think that's where this thing should be going, and let Amy work with John, and then they can generate that list. I call it a disclosure list. I don't know what engineers call it, but I'm not an engineer, so that's my term for it. But we've seen. Just to say to you, I don't blame you one way or the other for not wanting to get under it. But we've seen many projects come before us where engineer A designed the project and then for some reason isn't any longer a part of it, and engineer B comes in and certifies as to compliance or not. And if it's not, they just generate a letter saying, these are the discrepancies, these are where it's not in compliance. I guess that, I think, and I'm not going to speak for him, I think that's what Joe's asking for. He wants to know why we're not getting that list of where it doesn't comply. Amy, I think, is going to be able to give us that list because she's working with John, and I think that that's where it may go. But let me just send it down the table here, but that's my take right now, okay?
Where did the line work come from for this?
This is an on-the-ground topographic survey that was performed in October for the upcoming project. Again, it's specific just to the areas.
Okay, didn't it miss the parking area that's over there by the baseball field, or?
I think if maybe on one of the lower sheets,
There isn't really a hatch for it, but the line work is there.
you can see it, right? Sorry. Hold on, I can point it out. If you scroll down, Amy, to the sheet below this.
Down this way.
Yep, yep. Let's back up a little bit. Yeah, it's right here.
Okay.
Gravel road, this is the gravel area, and then on that sheet above, you can see where that line work continues a little bit.
Okay, so our survey here reflects the areas of non-compliance, they're just not called out.
Well, they don't fully reflect it.
What's
Both-
missing specifically?
Well, half of the violations are cut out of the view that is shown.
So just so you know, John Borghese asked for the CAD for the approved, for the new NOI, so it's he's working with all of these plan sets to get them all together.
So we're very
It's
close
a
to-
little more clear on the NOI plans where the gravel driveway is, so, and he's got that. John has got that, so.
Okay.
Brad, just to clarify, I wasn't implying that they didn't survey that, because we've already seen plans with the full shed in there, the full parking area in there. It's proximity to the wetland and the buffer zones. We've seen all that. They have it. It's just not shown in this PCOC set that's before us today. I think we're in the process.
Okay, so we have the information.
Yes.
It's not,
Yeah.
so we have all the survey information that we would want on an as-built within the project area. Obviously not certified by the previous engineer, and I think we gotta accept this point, we're not gonna get that. And I'm gonna support a plan that includes the mitigation that Jack asked for, but that does improve the high school at some point, so maybe my 11-year-old will have a nice softball field to play on one day.
Sir?
Nothing to add. Thank you.
Okay. Any additional discussion at this time? I'm going to call from any members of the public that want to be heard. Anybody at all that wants to be heard? Young lady.
Hi, my name is Melinda Perrone from 65 Meadowood Road. My son is a high school baseball player. He is a senior. And two things about that corner. First of all, the students will park there if they don't have a permit. So it's a very busy, that gravel area is a very busy parking spot for the kids who don't have parking permits. And then when there's a baseball game, people will just jam-pack that parking area and park along the curve, which is very dangerous because that's a major traffic way to the high school. Across the street, there's beaver activity, so that wetland area, I would say, just really is not respecting Kachikwick Brook. And I'm wondering if there was any way that the baseball field itself, which is now dumping thousands of baseballs into Kachikwick Brook, if it could be moved to the opposite side of the field.
Well, we can get into that in the notice of intent hearing. I think that's the most appropriate place
Thank
to talk about it.
Thank you. Anyone else from the public want to be heard? So I think, right now, I think we're only in a position where it has to be continued. Discussion points, I think, are clear, I think. I hope. So I'm going to recommend that we continue it at this time.
Yeah, I move that we continue to the next meeting. 2/26.
Motion and a,
Do we think we're gonna be ready on that?
I hope so. John said he was getting close.
is that a second?
Yeah.
Okay. I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? There being none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That's one opposed. The motion passes. The project is continued to the next meeting. Okay. Do you want to go, I think I'm going to, okay, we have one continuing. 242XXX Morningside Lane is asking to continue to 2/26/25. Motion and a
Second.
all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, and that's unanimous. So we'll move them back into 242-1906, 430 Osgood Street. This is now the notice of intent for the same project. Good place to pick it up. Amy, I would ask that you open up with whatever comments you want to, or just, you can send it right over to the engineers.
I'm going to send it right over to the engineers.
Is it possible, Amy, for us to hook into share or?
Yeah, if you want. Take this picture.
Okay. So stating for the record again, my name is Kyle Rowan, Project Manager with Gale Associates, here with my colleague Ryan Thackeray, also with Gale Associates. We are working on behalf of the town of North Andover on the high school athletics complex renovation project at 430 Osgood Street in North Andover. So before you, we have the permitting plan set that was submitted with our notice of intent package back in January. We will start by going through the existing condition sheets, if you want to get us to that, Ryan. So there are 4 areas across the high school parcel that we briefly touched on with the PCOC request previously, but point is there are 4 areas across the high school parcel that are subject to proposed improvements. First of these areas is the existing natural grass baseball field. Sorry.
So for the commission's packets,
We don't have the sheet.
I didn't print out every single sheet for you guys because I would have killed a small forest doing that. So I gave you guys the drainage and grading and demo and erosion control sheets, and I gave you the wetland restoration plan as well. So I tried to kind of weed out the more relevant sheets, and if you want more, I can get you more, but I figured giving you the whole thing would be a little crazy. So anyway, go ahead.
Okay, so before you is the existing condition sheet for the existing natural grass baseball field. Some items of note on this, we did go out and this is all a new topographic survey performed in October. That survey picked up wetland delineation flags that were placed by LEC Environmental Consultants earlier that month. On this sheet, you will see bordering vegetative wetland flags on 2 or 3 sides of our proposed project area, the east, south, and southwest. Some items of note as well is, let's see here. Oh, that's pretty much it for this. It's an existing natural grass and clay infield, baseball field. One other thing I guess I will point out, Ryan, if your cursor works on here, is you can see the dashed line sort of in right center field there. Yep, right here, that box. So that is an existing detention galley for the high school project that was installed in 2001. There is actually a drainage line that runs from the parking lot to that galley and then to the west below Walsh Field, which is the fields to the west, and then outlets into the river southwest off this plan sheet. So that structure and all other subsurface drainage infrastructure on this site are remaining in place, will remain and be protected throughout construction. We are tying in, which I'll get to when we get to the grading and drainage plans, but just want to make note that we are aware that galley is there. It will remain and be protected as well, along with all drainage infrastructure. If you want to go to the next sheet. The second area is going to be the tennis courts. There is an existing 6-battery bituminous concrete tennis court. We will be replacing this tennis court in kind when we get to the layout sheets. As you can see, it is pretty well tucked in by bordering vegetated wetlands on all sides. We will be staying within the existing footprint of these courts, but they will be being reconstructed. Next sheet, Ryan. Up at the Faris track, the work is more limited in this area. We will be adding 4 athletic light towers at the 4 corners of the track, as well as a shot put area down to the south. Again, we'll get to that when we get to those sheets. You want to go to the next one, Ryan? And then last, what you see here is Walsh Stadium, which is an existing dual turf field with stadium grandstand seating and limited athletic lighting around the west, east, and north sides. So now we'll jump into the actual proposed plans. I guess we'll start with well, we don't really need to go through the demolition sheets as much. I'll touch on these briefly. Sorry, go back one. Really, our demolition on this area is limited to the stripping of topsoil and whatever groundwork we need to do below that to get to the proposed subgrade. There is limited irrigation equipment in this area, which will be coming out as part of construction. We'll be demolishing the existing chain link fences, dugouts, as well as walkways. But to reiterate, again, the existing subsurface drainage infrastructure will remain. Next.
Mr. Chairman, rather than jumping sheet by sheet, can we interject some questions on the individual sheets?
Yes.
So I'll go back to the previous sheet. So, nope, that one right there. So in the prior discussion regarding compliance and Jack's position of the shed and the disposition of the shed and it being removed, why on the proposed condition would you show silt sock coming up to the shed, silt sock coming into the other corner, and not protecting it if it was to be demolished and removed? Clearly, it's not the intention. You show you're going to leave it there, just by your design and not noting it, and the way you oriented the silt sock. You have no intention of moving that shed, do you? That's all.
Next sheet.
Does anyone have an answer to that at all?
If we have to remove the shed, we'll remove the shed. It's already been moved one
It's
time.
already moved because you asked it to be moved.
I thought related to this board at some point in time. I don't know exactly how many years ago.
We need you to speak into the microphone, please. I'm sorry to interrupt.
I'm sorry about that. Hi, I'm Greg Landry. I'm the Director of Personnel and Operations for the school department. This is kind of new to me, first time at a Conservation Commission meeting, so thanks for having me here. But related to the shed, we were made aware of that. My understanding is the shed has been moved in the past from a previous location, and it was placed there with approval, I thought, from this group at some point a few years ago. But we will do whatever it takes to make sure that this project can go through, so we will take action and move that shed, and we'll mark off and do whatever we need to as far as the parking lot
I
goes.
appreciate the conviction of hearing that now, but the presentation earlier was that it was going to be removed. And the presentation now is this is what's being proposed for the baseball field, and it doesn't show that being moved. So thank you for clarifying you're going to.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Promise to follow through on that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Joe?
That's it.
Good for the moment?
I mean, just as we go through.
As we go through every sheet, if any member of the commission wants to ask a question, just ask, okay? We want to make this go efficiently. Go ahead, sir, thank you.
Yeah, and just speaking back on the shed as well as the gravel driveway, I think really it's important that we're having this hearing tonight and having these initial discussions. I think as Lori had alluded to, Gail was not originally hired on behalf of the original project, and therefore that certificate of compliance and applying for the partial certificate of compliance. So knowing these things, there is no reason that, for example, removal or movement of the shed and or removal of the gravel drive and replacement with loam and seed or something acceptable to the commission, there's no reason we can't include that in our bid package that ultimately goes for construction.
I'm not going to speak for the commission, but it's likely that it may be conditioned.
Yes, understood.
So you could anticipate that?
Yep.
All right, thank you. Thank you, go ahead.
Next sheet, Ryan, please. So moving down to the tennis courts, as I noted when we were looking at the existing condition sheets, we will be pulverizing and reconstructing these courts in place in the existing footprint. If anything, we'll be reducing the footprint slightly by chamfering the corners, but long story short, this will remain as is, and this is really just a full reconstruction at grade, ultimately with the same grading scheme that it currently has. We do not show a construction entrance on this sheet. However, as you can see on the sort of left side of that, there's a hatch that makes its way to the access drive between the limits of work. That is where our construction entrance is going to be. It is the only place where it's feasible. We will show that on the revised plans. And in addition to the tennis court work here, what you have up above towards the north access drive is a wetland restoration, a small wetland restoration aspect of this project, where we will be removing the existing walkway that runs between that access drive and the tennis courts, as well as the existing culvert, which has since failed. We will be removing both of those and restoring that section of wetland and That's the intent. Okay?
Any geotechnical work out underneath the tennis court or this vicinity?
Yes, we do have borings coming in that area. So right now, in terms of what we have for geotechnical information, we have the test pits at the baseball field. They went out there and they were able to do those sooner than later. The borings, the drillers, they take a long time, but we are expecting that report by
So I was
the
like,
week of the 17th.
I asked the question in the spirit of understanding that you're proposing pulverizing and reclaim. And if you were to encounter peat or unsuitable organic materials at depth, you still think that pulverization is the appropriate treatment?
I think we'll make that judgment once we have that information.
But you know
in
the
hand.
answer is no if you see in a organic or peaty materials, you know you can't pulverize.
Right. That's fine. I think.
Which means it's going to be a more disturbed area, a different approach, and the way you're in and out, it's going to be a different project if that were the case. So we need the borings sooner rather than later.
Yep, no problem. Like I said, we expect to have those the week of the 17th, and we will submit those to this commission. I think, any questions on this sheet? February.
February, okay.
Next week.
good. Okay, next week, all right.
You guys all set for next sheet?
Next sheet. Okay, so like I said, up at Freeze Track, our scope is more limited. Really, we are going to be installing 4 new athletic light towers within the limits of work that are shown, kind of those long rectangles on either side of the track on this sheet. We will also be demolishing and replacing the existing shot put area to the south.
A shot put area is not a new disturbance, it's existing?
Yes, the ones you see there, that's the existing conditions plan underlayment. Those are existing. We will be replacing them, reconstructing in a slightly different configuration and more or less the same footprint.
Okay. As long as it's not any new disturbance, I'm good.
Any questions? Joe, you ready to go to the next one?
I do. Ready?
Okay, go ahead, sir.
Okay. Last one, even more limited than the last sheet. This is the existing Walsh Stadium. You can't really tell from this plan, but that is an existing turf field in the center of the frame. There are existing athletic lights, again, on the west, east, and north side by the grandstands. What this project proposes is installing 2 additional athletic lights at the south side of the plan there. You can see those small square limits of work where that will ultimately be proposed. And in terms of the existing athletic lights, we are proposing to replace those fixtures with more modern, up-to-date LED fixtures. So the poles themselves will be staying. That's really just a matter of getting up there and replacing the fixtures.
There's a walkway along that side of the fence?
There
Or
is.
that area? How are the lights going to impact that walkway?
They will be right off the back of it.
Right off the back of it, so the walkway is not, okay. Just didn't think there was much room for that to move out.
There's not, but
Okay.
but they'll have the light pole itself right on the back edge of the walkway. It's I believe a 7 or 8 foot walkway, so should be plenty of space back there.
Okay.
Any questions down here? Questions on this end? We're good to go right now.
Okay. Okay, so we're making our way into the layout and materials sheets. So if you recognize this is the existing baseball field area. We are replacing this, proposing to replace this with a synthetic turf combination field, which will have baseball, softball in the northeast corner, as well as being lined for football, soccer, lacrosse, and field hockey. This is all one contiguous section of synthetic turf encased by a concrete turf curb with chain link fencing around that full perimeter. A portion of that perimeter, and well, it might be easier just to do on your mouse there with your cursor, but behind the baseball home plate, obviously we're going to have a 40-foot chain link backstop. And as you make your way out from that backstop, there will be 20-foot safety netting running down to about there on that side and down to there on that side. Those are primarily for protection of folks walking around the facility. Also up at the softball field, we have a 30-foot chain link backstop, as well as safety netting going down to the batting tunnels once again on either side. So again, the intent is protection, but also keeping as many baseballs as we can within the facility. And I will make one item of note as to what one member of the public has brought up already, which is that you can actually see on this plan the existing home plate down there. So while we are not moving the baseball field to the opposite side of this field, we are shifting it up north and away from the wetlands by a fairly significant amount, and that is about as far up as we can go while maintaining the layout for all of the other fields we're proposing in this. So other than that, you know, what you see around there, kind of those boxy looking objects, we have batting tunnels and bullpens, which are also synthetic turf surfaces, but we also have limited spectator seating more or less around the perimeter of the field, as well as 10 athletic light poles ranging from 70 to 90 feet in height, also around the full perimeter. And the last thing I'll make note of here is a perimeter walkway, more or less replacing a walkway that exists there now, but just extending to make sure we have a contiguous path around the full facility. Yes, and we will also have javelin throw. That's what you see up there in the top, almost top left corner.
It's the one on the bottom.
Or I'm sorry, it's the one on the bottom. That's in the natural grass area. Yep,
That is natural grass?
that
Okay.
is grass. That'll be loam and seed.
Is the turf for the field, is it gonna have that granulated rubber
Yes,
stuff? And
What, is it crumb rubber?
that is crumb rubber.
You're not, are you considering any other infill material, considering?
At the moment, we are not. There are alternatives, but right now, what we are proposing is the crumb rubber infill. Yes.
Is that herringbone pattern that's shown here, that is subsurface drainage collection, right?
Yeah, that's
Infiltrates
on
down through the media, through the protection media, like the rubber.
Yep.
Gets down into a sand layer, and then there's this herringbone pattern of subdrains, which collect to a perimeter manifold, which connect to a manhole, which connects to a drain pipe. And I imagine our stormwater review is being done by third party or in-house? Third party review. We want to make certain that what would have been rain on a natural turf is now, has a more direct time concentration for runoff. It almost becomes a point source discharge, even though it's collected on an infiltrating basis. You're creating a point source. So I want to make sure that that's zero net runoff, because it may not be.
Yep, we're accounting for that in our stormwater design, and as alluded to, it is being reviewed by a third party through the planning board submission site plan review process. And one other, we'll get to this when we're on the grading and drainage sheets, but in terms of the cross section of these fields, you have about 2 inches of the infill material. Below that, you have the actual backing of the turf carpet. Beneath that, you have 8 inches of washed stone. And then it's at the base of that stone that you have those herringbone flat panel drains.
Below that.
Above a geotextile, yes, above the stone, or below the stone, but above the geotextile, and then below that you have compacted subgrade. Those flat panel drains, like you say, manifold to a collection system that runs around the perimeter on the south, west, and east side, and then we tie into an outlet control structure at the south, but we'll get more into that when we're there.
You've got two herringbones that intersect the subsurface detention basin, which
Those are running over it. That basin is below where those flat
so they're
panel
not
drains are gonna fall.
they're not interacting at all,
Nope.
completely separated.
We had to shift the field limits a little bit because in original designs, the perimeter collector pipes were sort of overlapping, and so we had to shift the limits of the field because of that detention basin.
Yeah, and we can get into more detail on that sheet. Any questions on the layout and materials? One here.
Let me find out. Jack?
No questions at this time.
So one thing I would like to see on this one is if we're using that granulated rubber stuff, it's gonna be more important that we make sure no one parks on that entrance road, as our nice neighbor has alluded to. Otherwise, they're gonna be tracking that. I work in a building that's got one of the football fields on the roof that's got the granulated rubber. My stairwells are filled with that stuff. So I don't want them tracking the rubber, at least track it up towards the parking lots where the high school is and not down towards the wetlands. So it's gonna become, we're gonna have to do something that's better than no parking signs that no one pays attention to down there.
It sounds like, from my understanding, we'll be, at least as part of this project, converting that gravel area to loam and seed. And, I mean, even if, I believe there's a curb cut there right now, which of course makes it more tempting to go on and park. We can include that in the project, getting rid of
Parking
that.
signs every like 10 feet and they just park in a line, so they'll just park anywhere. Yeah.
Yeah.
physically.
We'll do
for
something.
the people.
It's not gonna, we'll try again, and they'll find a way to get around it and do
Is that,
something else.
is that zone that Brad's talking about, is that an area where a waiver is required?
The waiver is only, the only part of this project subject to that is the tennis courts.
The tennis courts, that's the only place you need a waiver?
Yep.
Okay, very good. Any questions at all? Sounds like we're good in the next sheet.
So I just want to
Oh.
point out that I was expecting to see the limit of the 200 riverfront area to slice through part of the existing baseball diamond, and that needs to be looked at a little bit more closely, just based on the 2001 plans.
Is the 200-foot zone
It's-
called out?
Yeah, but not where I mean, further on Walsh, but not through the diamond. So, and I don't know what LEC did with bank or mean high water in that area. I just,
So we can speak to this, actually.
Okay.
We got your question, and with respect to, I'm not gonna pronounce the name right, but the river that starts with a C there.
Common spelling.
With respect to that, actually, if maybe we could just pull up an aerial, that might be the way to look at it. So LEC, when they went out there, obviously the intent is to flag the mean annual high water where they can. They do have a good explanation as to why they couldn't go as far south as they wanted. Really, access became difficult, but also as you get further to the south, that portion of the river has been dammed up by 2 beaver dams sometime between now and 2013, which, based on that, the recommendation from LEC Environmental Consultants is that we actually go back to aerials from before that dam was constructed to get an estimation of where that mean high water line was prior to that. We did go back, we did do that, we put that into our CAD design, and then if you want to go back to that sheet, Ryan, what you see there, that highlighted yellow line, is your 200 riverfront. And then if you go to the next sheet, this is where it falls in relation to the proposed tennis court reconstruction. So that blue line there is the estimated mean annual high water line from old ortho imagery, which again, this was advised by our third-party consultant because getting an actual measurement or field observation of that line is no longer feasible.
Amy?
so revised plans will have that.
Yes, and we will label it as such, that it's not actually flagged in the field, but is an estimated mean annual high water line. 200 foot, I'm sorry. We'll label both.
So will, now that we do have more substantial work in the riverfront, will we need alternatives analysis for that?
Previously disturbed area?
Well,
The
they s-
outer-
they
the outer
still need to-
riparian zone
They
that-
still
that-
need to walk through that process.
Walk through it, so I
Right.
can see they understand what you're saying.
I mean, let's, I don't know.
No, I get it. You guys understand that alternative?
I mean, my mind
Yep.
goes to an alternatives analysis is the existing condition is worse, and the proposed condition is improving it. The first alternative is a better one. I think they may have done it.
Sounds like you just want it in writing.
I think the commission, I think the regs say we need it in writing.
We
Yeah.
regret-
I'm not,
yeah,
it's
we
not
reg-
my personal preference, it's what the regulations say.
I know, I'm just giving you credit for catching it, that's all.
Okay.
It's what we like to call a good catch.
Yep. Okay. I don't mean to make more work for people, but
I think this
this,
is,
you know,
I think this is understood
like,
that that's part of the
They
deal.
work with this all day long,
Yeah,
so it's
all
not,
day.
it shouldn't be a surprise.
Any questions on the, Joe?
Yeah, not a problem. We will include that written narrative alternatives analysis going forward. Okay, I think we were on the,
Left field distance there. It's about 310 to left field and right field, and then center
Just
field
like
is-
Fenway, 310 down the lines.
310, but no wall.
No wall.
Well, I think the chain link is 6 foot, where I think right Pesky's pole is only about 4. So,
You can put that up,
so again,
put that pole up,
we could, yeah. Might cost a pretty penny.
it might. All right, I think we were on tennis here, Ryan.
We going to tennis?
Yep, are we good on the previous sheet? I think we were.
Sounds like I don't hear any other questions, so.
Okay.
There's a gate on the corner, though. Bottom left.
Yeah, so we do always install a vehicle width gate on these courts just in case anytime in the future you need to get on there for maintenance purposes. There won't be a vehicle drive or anything of that nature to make it seem like it's something that's actually supposed to be used, but really we just don't want to lock vehicles out permanently from the court system in the event they're ever needed to get on there. A good example would be when they go to replace these courts in, 25 years, going and doing borings on there and getting a drilling rig. That's the only way you're going to do it. So talking through what's on this sheet, again, what you see here is a full reconstruction of the 6 battery tennis courts in the exact footprint of the existing courts. Like I said, we are cutting down as much as we can on the existing impervious area by chamfering the corners. We will be relocating the existing walkway, which, if you recall, currently cuts from through the proposed wetland restoration area to the access drive. We'll basically be taking that and relocating it as shown and realigning that access out to that portion of the access drive where the crosswalk is shown. That crosswalk does tie into an existing sidewalk on the other side of the access drive as well. So other than that, there's no lights out here. It's just an 8-foot chain link fence, bituminous asphalt tennis courts, standard acrylic surfacing, and a walkway. That is,
At 0.83 cross slope,
Correct.
east to west,
yes.
leading that whole westerly edge to the low end at around elevation 99. Do you have any sort of drip edge, any sort of runoff collection? What are you proposing? Just to have it run off?
We're just matching existing conditions right now, at the moment, yeah. That's that 0.83, it's, the existing courts are between 0.83 and 1, that's the standard grading for a tennis court. And at the moment, we are just matching the exact direction and footprint of that sheet flow.
Would we be conducive of an additional disturbance to add a drip edge?
I certainly would be.
I would.
I certainly would be, yeah.
Is that amenable to you guys?
Yeah. Certainly.
Let's all get buy-in on that one. I don't want to tell them to do disturbance, and you guys come back later. 'Cause we're going to have to deal with Sean.
I thought the same thing, but I wasn't sure myself. Like,
Well, Joe?
I'm not embarrassed to say it, drip edge.
Brad's calling for he wants to take the temperature here.
Well, I said I'm all set, it was my idea.
All right.
Yeah.
It seems like a standard request
Yeah.
on a situation like this.
It also seems standard to me, sir.
Okay. Let's get that added.
Okay.
That's progress right there.
That's progress. Also on this sheet, you'll see the plan view extents of the wetland restoration. We actually have a wetland restoration specific sheet, which we'll get to in a minute. So I'll hold off on that for right now. Any more questions on the tennis courts? Okay.
Amy?
Oops, sorry.
Okay, sounds like you're all set.
Okay, up to our more limited scopes of work here. So now we're back up at Farice Track, north of the high school. As you can see on the bottom right, this is the proposed reconstruction of the shot put area. Again, it's a realignment, but it's in a similar footprint to the ones that exist now. For context, what these are is just a 6-inch concrete curb, standalone concrete curb set flush with the existing grade, with a stone dust infill that makes up the actual throwing area of this facility. And then you have a concrete level pad to throw from on the southeast corner there. The other item on this sheet is the 4 proposed athletic lights. Again, these vary between 70 and 90 feet in height, and they would be at the 4 corners of the track as shown. In terms of wetlands, you do have bordering vegetated wetland down to the southeast corner there. We are currently outside of the 50-foot no-build zone with that proposed shot put layout.
You have no priority habitat on here, do we?
Nope.
are you thinking lighting?
Thinking lighting, yeah.
Well, we can still ask for dark sky. I don't know if you guys have.
The vendor that we typically use for these lights, obviously they deal with that all the time. They go through both phases of the dark sky certification, so we're more than happy to provide that as part of the process.
Thanks.
Same comment would hold true on the lighting that we're doing at the lower fields as well.
Yes. Okay, anything else on this sheet?
Any questions? Sounds like none.
Okay. Next one, so even less of a scope. As a reminder, this is the existing Walsh Stadium turf field. You'll see the two lights, one on the east side, one on the west side, 4 up north. We are again just replacing those fixtures. The real work proposed here is installing 2 new light towers at the south side of that field, just off of that walkway. Both of these fall outside of the 50-foot no-build zone. On the left, just outside. It's close, but by our design, we are outside of that. And on the right, we have more clearance. For reference, though, one point of note is obviously that one on the left, we do fall within the 200-foot riverfront area. We can add that to the alternatives analysis narrative. Light poles have to go where they have to go to provide the light that we're looking for. Anything else on this one?
All good.
Okay. So we've covered.
Do you want the track shown? The pathway? You had mentioned that earlier.
It's on here. It must just be very faint.
Only that I heard the conversation that far light, that it would be tight, but they'd have to work around it. Again, there seems to be also with the wetland, the second series of wetlands is close, but it's not very close. You probably could work around it. Just as long as you're staying more than 50 feet away.
Yeah, we can probably see these lines as you get a little closer.
Not highlighted, but this is the 50-foot right here.
It's a bit of a pocket.
Yeah, that's what we're gonna want to see.
Yep. And then, yeah, you can see the faint outline of the walkway as well. I think it gets kind of cut off by the tree
And
line.
actually, you know something? Go back to that area, because I see your 25. Where's your 50? Right up in the corner there? Boy, oh boy, yeah.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Yeah, you.
Pick your spot.
That is the one place we can go. Okay, back out. So we've covered the general scope of work at this point, all of the layout material sheets. Like I said, this is the sheet specific to the wetland restoration aspect of the project. It's about 940 square feet total in restoration, but we are getting rid of an existing culvert that has failed, as well as the walkway that once went through this, and returning it to a contiguous bordering vegetated wetland system with an open flow channel and plantings and a graded slope on either side. We have our planting list here. We do not have quantities on there at the moment, but you have your plant species as well as the minimum separation between plantings. So quantity will be determined in the field more or less by meeting those minimum coverage requirements. And other than that, one portion of this, which you'll see in the notes on this sheet, when they do go in here and remove the culvert and the walkway, they will also remove the first 12 inches of wetland material, soil material that they encounter above the proposed finished grade, or I'm sorry, below the proposed finished grade. So they're going to get down to finished grade, they're going to remove a foot of material, and they're going to replace that with clean fill, approved material. This will also be monitored by or supervised by a wetland scientist during construction. Any questions?
So it's partly a function of removing what has collapsed into the stream bed and the wetland? Is that part of the
Yes,
removal?
that culvert has failed. It's
Yeah.
it's a larger one,
Yeah.
CMP, I believe, corrugated metal.
It's rotted, yeah.
And the walkway as well on either side has collapsed. So we're getting rid of all of that. Going to be pulling. It's a fair amount of earthwork to get rid of that original grading earthwork to get that walkway up there. But then, like I said, they'll get rid of that as well as a foot below proposed grade of existing material.
Joe? For now, good?
Yeah.
Good. Gentlemen? Amy? Anybody in the public that wants to ask a question, now would be the time. None answer. Okay, I believe your recommendation, if I have it right, tell me if I got it wrong, I believe your recommendation on this one is to continue as well, like
Yeah,
the other one?
I do have like a list of 22 questions. Some of them got answered tonight, but,
So can you just submit that list to them? and-
oh, I already have.
Okay,
So I don't-
we've been on this hearing for a little more than an hour.
I got you. No, no, no.
If you
I'm
need a
not-
couple more minutes, that's fine, but
No,
I
no, no, no,
want
no,
to respect
no,
to
I'm
the
not-
other applicants out there.
No, I mean, you guys can just answer them. I
Yeah,
mean, some of
we-
them, we know the borings are coming. Riverfront, we already talked about. So some things have already been touched upon, but.
Yeah, and just so our directive is clear, one, will answer those questions formally in written format and provide that to the commission. And two, we will make the plan changes and other items we've discussed and effectively resubmit those plans. I assume you'd want to see those a week before the next hearing, if possible.
If you can, I mean, I understand the goal here is to get this thing closed. I understand that.
Always the goal.
Well, that's, so, I'm not gonna try to, I don't think we're gonna try to keep this open any longer than it has to, but you gotta answer the questions.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely. We're already partway there. We wanted formal direction, and now we'll turn that stuff around.
So the other item that was before us on the PCOC, that's very integral to this, so.
Yes. And I think that's a matter of us working directly with the town to get what they're putting together, and then I guess we submit that.
So you guys are gonna be busy,
Oh, yeah.
all right?
So I actually do have a question about current snow management on Walsh. I don't know what is happening there now. I mean, I assume you plow it so they can do winter stuff?
I'm not too sure about Walsh. I'm sure the access road coming in, I know we keep it away from the line on the right side, and we pile it sort of around what the baseball field is on the high end. But as far as Walsh Field, snow management, I can find that out.
Okay. Just because Lexi and I took an MACC webinar today about permitting artificial turf fields and all the stuff that we should be worrying about. But plowing the snow off the field carries all of the rubber. And so you've got all this rubber that's just.
Is there an alternative to that, or is that locked in? I mean, that's not jurisdictional to us, is it? Or is it?
Under O&M, I think migration materials and management of those would be
Yeah.
germane to us.
Yeah.
The O&M plan should include that. We haven't even talked about an O&M plan. That's part of the submission, right?
So
Yeah.
that should be part of you when you come back.
And Amy had a few questions in her list of 22 questions that addressed some of that, like.
Yeah, we'll address those as best we can in that response narrative, and we'll be sure it's added in the O&M as well. I believe we already do have something to that effect in there, but
Yeah, there's an O&M as one of the attachments for the notice of intent package, and there's some mention of snow plowing. But we can, I don't
We'll
remember exactly
clarify.
what the language is, but revise it, beef it up.
You good? If you have a
I
question?
mean, I'm gonna glean out potential conditions from other communities that have permitted athletic turf fields.
Yeah, for purposes of the O&M.
With updated information, because we had like zero information in 2001 about, chemicals in the rubber and et cetera, so we have a lot more information about, PFAS that are coming off the crumb rubber and,
Okay.
I don't know if you guys want to push them to think about an alternative infill, but I'm just,
I mean, I think
it's
if
your
it's,
decision, it's,
I think it would be, I'd love to see an alternative.
Your sports field counts, right? Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, speak off the cuff. What are we looking at for alternatives to that stuff?
one of the most common alternative infills we see in the New England area is the proprietary name is Brockville. It's an engineered wood product, and basically it's just tiny wood chips that you put in the field in place of the crumb rubber infill. It does require a shock pad, which is a recycled foam pad that has to go beneath that infill to give you the actual impact attenuation you need for the athletes. So it has that asterisk, but that is one of the more common things that we see up here that we have a lot of experience with.
What's your opinion on it?
Fine. It's a cost increase, a significant
Yeah.
one, especially for a field this
That's-
size.
Yeah, what's,
So for a standard rectangular field, you're looking probably at around 80 to 100,000 to make the switch to that type of infill. For this one, I don't really want to guess, but it's more than that.
The other benefit is the heat exhaustion concerns for the athletes as well, right? Doesn't the rubber infill is much, much hotter playing surface?
It does. We do regularly, when we do these projects with that particular infill, we install quick connect valves around the field for water connection. So they can go on and they can hose the field down occasionally on those really hot summer days to attenuate that. It is a thing, it is a concern. I will say it holds heat much less than a blacktop asphalt pavement does, basketball court, that type of thing. But when the sun is out, middle of the day, middle of the sky, it produces some heat. But as soon as the sun's gone or you have a cloud, it dissipates rather quickly. And like I said, we do have some measure of attenuation with water.
And you're not reworking the surface on Walsh at all, you're simply putting the lighting on the perimeter of it.
Correct.
And
There is
So what's
no-
there is there, and I know the other stuff that we're talking about, where, to follow along Amy's concerns, and again, it's just, she scratched the surface, and it's a valid one, and how far do you wanna go? You've got, we know we're gonna have an infiltrating system, we're gonna have a battery of subterranean, subsurface pipes to collect it to a battery, which is gonna find a way to a manhole. So whatever chemicals we're collecting in that, we're not filtering through natural soils, inorganic materials, we're filtering through a chemically charged rubber media and finding its way out to a discharge point into a system that's gonna be carrying a heavier pollutant load, diminished water quality, and I think we would wanna know that. And I think
We do,
would wanna better understand what that looks like, because that's not there now. That, we're gonna be introducing that into the system.
We do have an outlet control structure. I know we didn't get to the drainage sheets, and I'm kind of guessing because we're continuing this anyways. And
No, I'm saying beyond typical stormwater management, I'm saying there's also a water quality aspect that runs parallel to that.
Right, no, I understand. What I'm getting at here is we have an outlet control structure at that southeast corner of the field, which is the only outlet of that system and more or less acts as an overflow. The intent of the design is for stormwater to be captured within this turf field, and before it's able to surcharge above that outlet control structure, it's meant to stay in this field. It will infiltrate through the clean, washed base stone, the 8 inches of stone we have below the turf material. It'll make its way through a geotextile fabric layer, and then you have, I believe, 3 or so feet of compacted soil material beneath that, followed by the dense glacial till. So water will still infiltrate down through that system, down into that. It's not as if all the water that hits this field is going to be making its way out of that outlet control structure.
I am, and I imagine some of my colleagues are a little gun shy, because we had another project in town that was using all the proper techniques, even to the point of proactively using recycled concrete materials, which all we did was simply infiltrate through various horizons, pick up calcite and totally pollute the perimeter around it, and they have a groundwater monitoring and testing and treatment plant that's gonna be probably running for the next 20 years on a brand new site, so. We're a little gun shy of what water quality diminution might look like.
Yep.
So come in with an alternative or two.
For infills? Okay.
Yeah, just make it part of your presentation and
I like the cost.
we'll give it all due consideration.
Okay. Not a problem.
All right, I'm looking for a motion at this time.
For how long? 2 weeks, next meeting?
I think we can hit that. I guess it's, I guess one thing I want to ask is this notice of intent application and making a final motion on this perhaps in 2 weeks. I'm assuming that is tied to the partial certificate of compliance application, so that also has to be
It's all tied together.
all tied together.
Yeah.
As it will be to third-party stormwater review that planning board is going through, because we will wait for that as well.
Okay.
So and I know Janet's still working on that. And I know
And I'm sure you understand that that's actually relaxing what our normal requirement is. in fact, even what the regulations say, you should even be filing an NOI until that was already done. So the fact that we've even gone through that discussion for the past hour is actually us relaxing the standard.
Yeah, no, we appreciate that, and that's our understanding of the discussions we had beforehand. So we'll continue.
I have, okay, yes, Laura, sorry.
Quick question on the turf. We cannot afford another $100,000, so I guess my question is it really worth going through that exercise if it's gonna just blow the budget? So if we have to do that, then we're probably not doing the work at the upper field or at the football field. Like, we're gonna have to come up with a pecking order for everything that gets required of this project outside of what we've already anticipated. So I was unaware that you had jurisdiction over deciding what kind of surface we use there.
Water quality, we absolutely do. That's the importance of flushing these issues
Right.
out very early in design development. Never should have gotten to this point without having these discussions a year ago. Would have been smoked up much earlier. The budget could have been focused, could have reallocated.
Okay, so just for point of clarification, we just got funding for this at town meeting in May, and as soon as we got funding, we hired Gail, and we met with Amy. We met with Amy to go over the preliminary plans and ask her if she had any information that we needed to include. We also met with members of conservation. And now you're saying that we're doing it the wrong way. So I just want to be clear that we are bending over backwards to do everything that we're being asked to do. And if we're going to be required to add $100,000 to the project for surfacing, that is going to impact what we do here.
Not knowing what you're going to have to add or not add, you're not going to pollute the area by infiltrating polluted water through potential pollutant load that's going to be picked up and discharged. You can't do it.
But we don't know that yet.
We don't know that.
They're
Maybe
gonna
there is
submit-
something.
They're gonna submit the data to us. Joe's right, but we don't know, we don't have all the information yet.
Okay.
Give us a chance to get the information, give Gail a chance to give us what we need,
Yep.
and we'll work on it very diligently.
So from our perspective, that granulated rubber stuff is proven to be pretty crap for the environment as it breaks down. So, I mean, we have some reason to have a little pause here.
Okay.
Now, we are gonna take into consideration that we would like an improved field out there, but let's not act like we don't have a reason to inquire about
It all
this.
comes down to the water quality, I know you know that, and that's what we're looking at.
Okay.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments, concerns? Anybody? I have a motion and a second to continue to the next meeting. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, and that's unanimous. I assume it's unanimous?
Yeah, I
Okay,
voted on that one.
unanimous. Thank you all. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Okay, next item on the agenda is 242-1907, the Route 114 right-of-way from Waverly Road to Willow Street, Mill Road, Mass DOT.
I didn't give you much in your packets because there was just too much to give. I mean, when I started going the rabbit hole, I just couldn't do it. So,
We don't expect you to go down rabbit holes.
okay. Alrighty, I'm gonna hand it over.
Gentlemen, the floor is yours.
Thank you for having us tonight. I'm Sam Campbell with Greenman Peterson Inc., the environmental lead for this project. My colleague,
I'm John Tamburini. I'm the project manager for this project.
and also with us is Kevin Thompson, who is an environmental analyst for Mass DOT. So thank you for having us here tonight. I think I'll just start out by saying that we recognize that this is a significantly large project, geographically and in scope. We certainly expect that you'll have plenty of comments and questions, and as Amy said, there was a lot of material in the application. So I think our goal tonight is to just give you an overview of generally what we're proposing, and then, open up the floor so that you can give us some feedback on information you might need. The presentation that we're sharing was presented at a variety of other public meetings. There have been some modifications made. The first half deals primarily with the overall scope of the project. I think we'll breeze through that section relatively quickly and then focus on the areas that are relevant to the Wetlands Protection Act and this notice of intent. Yeah, if you want to start on this first slide, Amy, thank you. So the project limits begin at the intersection, or a point west of the intersection of Waverly Road at Route 114. That initial portion of the project there is, a piece of it is actually in Lawrence, and some of the work at that western end is jurisdictional under the WPA, so there's roadway resurfacing happening in jurisdictional areas there, so we are filing for a request for determination of applicability with the Lawrence Conservation Commission as well. Continuing east along the corridor 114, we have the intersection with Peter Street, Andover Street, Andover Bypass, Hillside Road, Mill Road, and Willow Street at the eastern end of the project limits. So the total length of the work on Route 114 itself is 2.2 miles, and the overall length of the project is about 3.2 miles. I'll also mention that on Andover Street, a portion of that work extends into Andover. Similar situation, there's some work in the 100-foot buffer zone, so there's an RDA being filed for that as well. Other permits that we have either at this point or in the process of obtaining, the project did go through MEPA review. It required both an expanded environmental notification form and an EIR because it was located within environmental justice populations. We also have a 401 water quality cert and 404 authorization filed with Mass DEP and the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers currently. They've received those materials and already provided us with some initial comments that we will be responding to this week. I think that about covers it for project limits, and I think just like with the last hearing, if commissioners have questions, we're happy to answer them. This is just a project timeline sort of outlining the major milestones. I don't think we need to spend too much time here. Probably jump to the next slide. Yes. Yeah, I mean, just very briefly. Yeah, this project was sort of birthed out of a Merrimack Valley Planning Association study of the 114 corridor and identified as a priority for improvement for a number of reasons. Again, just a brief history of public outreach for this project. Beginning in 2018, we were having public meetings, and then we also had MEPA consultation meetings over the past 2 years, one of them being in person at Merrimack College. Jump to the next slide. So just a very quick overview of project cost and funding. There's a slight misstatement on this slide, and I apologize. The $60 million here actually does include the utility relocations, so that is captured in that number. And the funding source, we're looking at 80% federal aid funding and 20% state funding. So again, this project is really, the product of several existing corridor studies, one of them being the 2010 corridor study, as well as a number of road safety audits for intersections along the corridor. The primary issues that we're trying to address with this project are the deficient pedestrian accommodations. We have a lack of continuity with the sidewalks throughout the corridor. There's no bicycle accommodations in the existing condition, and several of the intersections experience pretty significant congestion and delays. Areas of concern, very briefly, the intersections that you see circled here are high crash locations that have been identified. Well, either intersections with no fill are just project intersections. The ones with the yellow infill are HSIP eligible, which means they're high crash locations. So that includes the Waverly Road intersection, Peters Street, Andover Street and Elm Street, Andover Bypass, and then finally Mill and Willow at the eastern end. So very briefly, I'm sure many of you are familiar with this area. We have portions of this road that have absolutely no sidewalk accommodations at all. So you can see very narrow roadway shoulders, and you have instances where people that are walking are either squeezed up in that shoulder, or you can see the desire lines of people treading on vegetation and mulch that's out there today. So we can jump to the next one. Mm-hmm. Similarly, we have a very brave cyclist on the right there near the Boston Market. There's no bicycle accommodations out there today, very narrow shoulders, and, you know, where there are sidewalks present, generally we are trying to keep cyclists off of sidewalks, but if they were using them, they're not contiguous and they're not really, you know, ideal for a cyclist to be utilizing. And then delays. I'm sure many of you are familiar. Here we're looking basically towards the Market Basket and 495, and you can see the traffic queued up to get into the Waverly Road intersection pretty much all the way back to the Stop and Shop driveway. I know that in the mornings in particular, this one sometimes backs up all the way to 495. So generally speaking, along the corridor, we're looking at either a proposed 5-lane or 4-lane section. The 5-lane section includes a center 2-way left turn lane, or at intersections designated left turn lanes and signals. There's also one area east of Hillside Road where we're actually looking at a 4-lane section, but there's only one through lane in the eastbound direction. That drops down after the intersection with Hillside Road and really was implemented to try to reduce some of the property ownership impacts as well as some of the wetland impacts in the vicinity of Mosquito Brook. So there should be a rendering of the proposed corridor on this sheet, but it's not displaying properly. I would just say ultimately these are pretty detailed and in the weeds about the improvements happening in each section, so we can probably yeah, that's if you go to this one, that's what the others are supposed to look like there. Just very quick overview. So we're looking at Merrimack College's campus, bottom screen, Royal Crest Drive, top right. You can see the proposed roadway configuration, and on the south side adjacent to Merrimack College, where there is already a shared use path, that path will be continued, resurfaced, reconstructed with a vegetated buffer, landscape plantings in the median, and a new crosswalk and signal at Royal Crest Drive. Yeah, I'm not sure. We can maybe try to revisit these. And yeah, this one, looking at Hillside Road, again, you can just see the proposed roadway layout as well as the intersection reconstruction. I think the other thing we can do, Amy, is maybe once we open it up, you have the electronic plans? Yeah. Maybe we could look at some of those for a more specific. I'll finish with this for now. Okay, all right. Yeah, I just recognize this is a pretty high-level overview. So, again, the Mosquito Brook section, so you can see the Jasmine Plaza as well as the Stop and Shop there. We're approaching the eastern project limit at Willow and Mill, and that one's also playing hooky from us tonight. But ultimately, with the roadway reconstruction, you're looking at more or less a similar alignment to what's out there today. I think one of the key improvements that this project will create is the contiguous network of pedestrian and bicycle accommodations. So as you can see on this display here, the proposed sidewalks are shown in magenta, the proposed shared use path is shown in light blue, and this project will really establish that continuous connection for people that want to walk or bike the corridor from all the way from Waverly to Mill, which is, you know, important because, especially with the college there, there's a significant number of potentially walkable trips to the retail institutional developments along the corridor. I think if it's okay with the commission, we can come back. This is specifically about intersection alignments, transit accommodations, right-of-way impacts. So again, a little bit more relevance for MEPA, but MassDOT is responsible for acquiring the right-of-way for this project in accordance with all the state and federal regulations. And in this case, we have both temporary and permanent easements to facilitate construction and access, as well as 3 takings in the vicinity of Hillside Road. On to jurisdictional wetland resource areas. So within the project limits and adjacent to the project limits, we have bordering vegetated wetlands, bank, land under water bodies and waterways, and bordering land subject to flooding. The bordering land subject to flooding within the project limits is associated with Mosquito Brook. The effective FEMA firms for Mosquito Brook show it terminating on the, what we're calling the south side of the road, so on the Jasmine Palace side, as a Zone A with no base flood elevation determined. The preliminary firms that FEMA has released actually show the entire area within 100-year floodplain. Again, it is still a Zone A, so they have not determined the base flood elevation. The limit of the study is the Chestnut Street crossing. So our base flood elevation, which maps pretty well onto what FEMA has established as their GIS limit, is based on the modeling that was conducted through the hydraulic and hydrologic process for the Mosquito Brook culvert replacement. And what that showed was that during the 100-year storm event, the water surface elevation is 236.9 NAVD88. So the boundary that you're going to see on the plans is that contour extracted from our topo surface. Wetlands were delineated in the fields. Again, this project has a relatively long history. Beginning in December 2016, again in April 2017, May 2020, and then most recently in November 2023. Majority of the wetland resource areas within the project limits that will be impacted are located towards the eastern end and are hydrologically connected to Mosquito Brook. So if you're familiar with the 114 corridor, the high point for our project limits is really Hillside Road. And everything from Hillside west towards Waverly kind of flows downhill towards the Waverly Road intersection. Everything east of Hillside is kind of sheeting down towards Mosquito Brook. And finally, I would just say, kind of the primary, there's a few other spots where we do have resources. So there's one outfall to a stream in the vicinity of Peter Street. That stream is culverted several hundred feet beneath the Ace Hardware and is actually linked to Becky's Pond. We'll be reconstructing that outfall. There's also BVW adjacent to Route 114 and Route 125, sort of on the fringe of Merrimack's campus. So proposed environmental impacts, due to the existing configuration of Route 114, there's several areas where to implement these improvements, those impacts are essentially unavoidable. I will say that we have taken steps, as prescribed in the Wetlands Protection Act regulations, to avoid where we can, minimize where we can, and then mitigate for those areas where we can. So examples of minimization include reducing the width of the proposed shared use path. The preferred width would be 12 feet. Standard would be 10. There's areas where we've reduced it to 8 to reduce our footprint within the wetlands. Using sheet pile walls to minimize the footprint of widening in the vicinity of Mosquito Brook. And then for mitigation, we're looking at the construction of wetland replication areas, compensatory flood storage areas, and stormwater control measures. Again, here we just have a summary of the permits that we've kind of proceeded with to date. I won't go through those again unless there's questions. So proposed impacts to bordering vegetated wetlands, we're looking at about 1,018 square feet of temporary impacts, permanent impacts being 2,654 square feet. Land under water, 854 temporary, 5,870 permanent. Those impacts to land under water are primarily associated with a system that you're seeing here in this photograph, but there's several swales in the vicinity of the Mill and Willow intersection that were constructed prior to the effective date of the act and have therefore been delineated as stream channels. So this project is going to widen into those and then reconstruct them adjacent to their existing locations so that they still provide the stormwater function that's being provided in the existing condition. We've also had conversations about what the finished landscape condition of those swales is going to be so that they can still provide some degree of habitat, which is one of the interests of the act. And as you can see today, it's all phragmite, so invasives, not super high quality, and all sorts of other unpleasant things that have kind of flown in there from the gas station, shopping carts, tires, you name it.
Phragmite grows in gas.
Grown just about anything, I think we found. Bank, again, primarily looking at those swales and the Mosquito Brook culvert replacement with those bank impacts, 161 linear feet temporary, 819 permanent, and then bordering land subject to flooding. The surface area impacts are about 13,668 square feet total, just looking at roadway resurfacing and construction of a new sidewalk and shared use path. The fill volume is 645.1 cubic feet. Yep, so just to give a little bit more detail about our proposed mitigation measures, and we have some more detailed slides following. We are proposing to construct 2 wetland replication areas totaling 4,160 feet, which is in excess of the proposed permanent impact area. All temporarily altered areas of BVW are to be restored in situ with a native wetland seed mix. and all of the wetland replication work, really any of the work on site that involves work within wetland resource areas, is to be overseen by a wetland specialist who will be contracted as part of the job. Constructing 2 new stormwater control measures, one of them adjacent to the market basket at the western end of the project limit. That'll be an infiltration basin. And the other is a proposed bioretention area, which is going to be in the sort of grassed infield area created by the reconstruction of the 125-114 intersection at Andover bypass. Proposed compensatory flood storage area, and then finally replacement of the existing Mosquito Brook culvert with a new culvert crossing that actually meets the stream crossing standards.
If I
It
read
does,
right.
yes. Yeah. And we'll get to it, but the existing one does not, just to clarify. So our 2 wetland replication areas, these are going to be located, so you see the gap in the middle, that is Seville Street, which is a paper street, but isn't actually developed or paved. 2 areas, there's a wetland system kind of on each side that has really extended to encompass majority of the property there. So we're using the remaining upland for replication. So it's in line with the BVW 7 and 8 series on the plans. The areas will be regraded, planted and seeded. Again, when we do that regrading, the wetland specialist that's overseeing the work will ensure that the soils on site are either excavated to a depth where they're hitting hydric soils, and if not, bring in hydric soils to ensure appropriate setting for those proposed wetland plantings. And just a quick summary of the plantings themselves. Looking at red maple, buttonbush, winterberry, swamp azalea, swamp white oak, and high bush blueberry. I think if there's specific species that the commission would like to see in that area, we could modify it to include some. So stormwater improvements, this is what we are referring to as SCM1, or Stormwater Control Measure 1. It is a proposed infiltration basin adjacent to the Market Basket property on the sheet north side of Route 114. So this infiltration basin is actually the product of some existing issues that were observed on Waverly Road. So on Waverly Road, about a few hundred feet up from its intersection on the north side with 114, there's a culvert that conveys an unnamed stream below the roadway. During the MIPA process, actually, when we had the really severe storms, we had...
Said our kids had a name for it. We lived on the brook.
The brook. Good.
It's unnamed, but our kids had a name.
That's, local knowledge. So, if you guys lived on it, you might have experienced some of this flooding.
We certainly did.
Yes. So we were in a MIPA public meeting, and we had residents joining and sort of saying, hey, we're all in about 2 feet of water in the basement, so we couldn't attend this meeting tonight. There was follow-up with one of the neighbors directly adjacent to the outlet of the culvert on Waverly Road. They experienced really severe erosion issues, and you probably saw some of that. I would imagine it was an emergency cert to repair. So the town approached MassDOT and said, we know you're working on the 114 project, can you take a look at potentially what inputs you have to this system that could be contributing? And what we found was, as we mentioned earlier, majority of the western half of the site flows downhill towards Waverly Road. It was all going, then taking a right angle turn up Waverly Road and outletting on the upstream side of that culvert. So, in the proposed condition, we're going to plug and abandon that existing outfall at the upstream side of the culvert, and all of the runoff that is now being discharged right at that culvert inlet and contributing to that downstream erosion and scour is going to be directed to this basin instead. The basin itself, it's constructed with a sediment forebay for pretreatment, deep sump catch basins feeding into it along the whole system, and then it has a overflow should it ever, reach that level towards the same stream system that it was previously flowing into, but now downstream. Yep.
Yes. Okay. I just see the wetlands just adjacent to it, and that looks to be a couple feet below it, so.
Yeah, it's pretty close on the overflow side there. The embankment kind of pushes us closer to the road, and they did the test pits there and came back in the clear. I think one design change that we talked about, so we had conducted a site visit for this project in November 2024 with Amy as well as Mass DEP and the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. This was our first stop. We kind of went tromping around in the woods back there to look at that stream channel. It was dry at the time of observation, but there was some pretty severe evidence of, high flows and really deep scour on the banks. Initially, that outfall, the overflow outfall, was shown closer to the bank, so we did shift it so that it wasn't right up on the edge of the bank. There is a slight vegetated setback from the end of the overflow. And there's no BVW there, it's just upland and then the stream bank.
Has the reviewer given you any static proximity of infiltration to wetlands?
Sorry, could you
Has
repeat
the
that?
reviewer said anything about proximity of infiltration to wetlands?
So it was reviewed by MassDOT's stormwater unit internally, as well as basically designed in accordance with the state handbook and the stormwater design guide that MassDOT maintains. We do recognize that, infiltration close to wetlands can be.
Yeah, I think book says 50 foot to outstanding waters.
Yeah.
But I mean, there's nowhere else you can put it, and I'd rather have something than nothing.
Right. So I think this isn't an outstanding resource water, though.
Okay.
From a hydrology perspective, how much credit did you take for infiltration as you looked at the overflow and ultimate discharge? Or is the idea to infiltrate all of it, and the overflow was only in an emergency circumstance?
Exactly that.
Which is why you asked the question. Knowing that soil's down there, I'm shocked to hear those results, but okay.
I mean, we can confirm that.
So just get my orientation right. I'm looking at Winthrop Avenue. I'm looking northeast, if you will. Market Basket would be diagonally to my left, correct?
Yep.
And going upstream, uphill to the right. So there's a culvert underneath that southerly driveway to Market Basket.
Yep.
They just upgraded it within the past 10 years. Maybe sooner, more recent, I don't know. Is that culvert not going to see any more water now because it was handling what came down the street? Or is it the brook that comes around the back going to continue to work around the back and get to that culvert?
Exactly. So there will still be inputs to the brook from the natural stream that flows through the culvert. What's going to happen, though, is the discharge from our MassDOT's existing pipe during storm events is no longer going to go there. So ideally, the flow volumes will be less during those storm events as it's all being sent to this infiltration basin. But that brook wraps around and goes into the system that you were just describing. So when it flows naturally, unless there's a drought, I think it will still see flow there.
So I guess the question ultimately becomes, under the worst case scenario, when the detention pond, seasonal high water table, detention ponds not holding water, not recharging, it's all simply flowing through, it's going to be no worse than it is now.
Correct.
The culvert's going to continue to see what it's currently seeing.
Right, so this will take some of the burden off of that upstream culvert, and then if it is a situation like you've described where we have high groundwater and that water's just building up in the basin until it reaches the overflow, it's going through the overflow system, which is designed to be stabilized and spread that flow so that it's not just like a fire hose pointed right at that stream bank.
Questions? All right, sir.
Great. I'll just add, for your information, that treats about 100,000.
So one last question on the same location. So this is wonderful. You get a permit, you build it. Is this a DOT facility, and how often does it get maintained?
Yep. So there is an O&M plan in the stormwater report that we provided. It will be a DOT facility, owned, operated, and maintained by DOT. The project that, just general structure, the project that we're here with the permit for is run out of headquarters. Once it's complete, it's turned over to district operations. I don't know the exact frequency, but I can say it's in line with the standards for stormwater control measure of an infiltration basin. And I think
This is DOT's MS4, not the town's.
correct.
All the system comes from your facilities.
There are, I think, a few places where there's interconnections just where you have the side streets flowing into some of the MassDOT systems.
I only asked the question in the context that it's not the town needing to enforce it. It really ultimately can be EPA and your MS4 permit.
Right, EPA, state to EP, but I would also say that, if there are, I know that you're all, sounds like, especially local to this location, if you notice that there's issues or it doesn't seem to be functioning, putting in the call to district because they have, miles and miles of road, and it can be difficult to keep an eye on everything during every storm. And they can then dispatch a maintenance crew.
We recognize that, and that's why I asked the question.
I appreciate it.
So I want to encourage you to move along.
Yes, apologies. Our second stormwater control measure, this one's a little more straightforward. It's a bioretention area. It will be constructed at the intersection of Andover Bypass and 125 and 114. Yep, in the vicinity of the Dollar Tree, just treating generally the impervious area from 114 in that vicinity. It's about 20,000 square feet of impervious that goes to this one. Compensatory flood storage area, again, this one is just slightly west of the proposed wetland replication area. As you can see, Seville Street here again, it sort of loops around there. So this is where we're providing comp storage for the fill impacts in the vicinity of Mosquito Brook. The hydraulic and hydrologic analysis for the project also showed that it will not result in a rise in the base flood elevation. So the no-rise analysis was completed. I'm sure everyone's daunted looking at this table, thinking I'll speak for another 20 minutes, but generally speaking, Mosquito Brook culvert replacement, what we have out there today under Route 114 is a 48-inch RCP pipe. It does not meet the Massachusetts stream crossing standards. It's partially embedded. We don't believe that that was by design. It's just the natural buildup of sediment over decades. The proposed culvert is going to be a 18-foot wide, 4-foot tall, precast concrete box culvert, 80 feet in length under the roadway. It will be embedded with modified rock fill and then over top natural stream bed material. And it does achieve the crossing span of 1.2 times bank full width, as well as the openness ratio of at least 0.82. You'll notice it's relatively wide for its height. That's because we can't make it much higher just because of where the crest of the roadway is.
Utilities that are under it, sewer and water, they're going to be underneath.
Yeah.
Yes, correct.
The sewer project that came to us,
Yep.
the town sewer project, has that been done?
No.
So is it what's there now, or what the town's about to do? Because they're actually changing the
Yeah.
sewer out in that area.
We've actually been coordinating with Woodard Curran and the town. They're the town's consultant doing that work. They're actually going to be coming from I believe it's the Willow Street pump station, that's getting demolished and then coming up, and they're going to be reconstructing the Jasmine Street pump station, and that's essentially where their work is going to end. So it's going to be essentially right before the culvert, and then we're tying.
So they're force main out of that existing station, they're going to leave in place, and you guys are going to be over it. The new station at Jasmine, opposite Jasmine,
Yep.
is where their work ends, but they're going to still tie into the force main that's there.
Yes.
But that's deep enough that your culvert's going to be over it.
Yes, correct. And any work that is to be done, we will relocate those utilities. So water, there is a force main and a gravity that we will relocate under the new culvert as well.
Okay.
Quasi-conservation, because one of the things we want to do is avoid wherever we can. Are those going to be sleeved?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yep.
So we don't have to dig them ever again.
Exactly, yep.
Yeah, this final slide is more relevant to the public traffic and access impact, so we can probably close it on that.
Let me see if anybody has any specific comments, then I'm going to ask if any are butters, and then we're going to move.
Great.
I'm going to get right to you. Let me go to the table first, okay? Thank you. Mayday, no questions. Joe?
I've
all
been
set?
asking as I go, thanks.
10 years makes a great project. No questions, thank you.
Young lady, you would like to take the podium? We'd be happy to.
Thank you. Melinda Perone, 65 Meadowwood Road. Just wanted to ask about the beavers. So there's a beaver that frequently will fill up that area of the culvert, and then one across the street, a little farther up across from the gas station. So is there any comments about that, or?
Sure. So I can say that This sort of comes back to the hydraulic and hydrologic analysis that was conducted for the project. There are 2 control points in that model. One of them is the Chestnut Street crossing that is downstream. The other is upstream. I believe it's a Willow Road crossing. Willow snakes behind the plaza there. So those were the control points that they analyzed, and we were made aware. I did a site visit when it was far too cold to go look at the beaver control structure that was at Chestnut Street. I would say as of our most recent visit to the site, which was November, we didn't see any direct beaver activity at the Mosquito Brook culvert. So at this point, the plan is to replace that culvert, as we've described here tonight, with the understanding that it has both the ability to convey flood flows and standard flows and won't result in a change in the water surface elevations. And then ultimately, if issues with beaver activity develop either at that culvert or at any of the others in that system, I think that would just be something that would need to be coordinated with the town. And if it involves needing to do work on a MassDOT structure, then potentially MassDOT would get involved again. But I think at this point, I would say that we're not proposing any sort of beaver control or any breach of any existing dams or anything like that.
Plus the width, the span of that new crossing is going to be so great, even in those high flow conditions, the velocity is going to slow way down. And the whole thing that attracts beaver activity is that speed of the water and the noise it makes. So by widening it the way you do for stream crossing standards, you're actually minimizing the threat from the beaver activity.
As hopeful as you are. Let's see how long it lasts. But no, I think you're right. I think ultimately it will be, a net improvement both in just the natural function of the stream, but also in potentially resolving some of those problems before they arise.
You might have to be prepared to put up a flow device, though.
Yeah.
Because they'll find a way.
Yeah,
I'd include the flow device as part of your submittal now.
Okay. We can talk about that.
Deceiver. The deceiver. All right, so what are you looking to do next? When do you need to come back?
I think we would like to set the continuation for 2 weeks, if that's acceptable.
Okay.
I think Amy has some additional follow-up for us, give you a chance to review some of the other materials in detail if you would like. And, with the understanding that we'll submit materials a week before that. And
The sooner you get stuff into Amy, the better chance she has of getting started on a decision for you.
absolutely.
So it's in your hands.
Okay.
This is, where it's a state project, would not do third-party review, no escrow?
Well, that's why I talked to Sam about that.
No bylaws.
And generally, DOT doesn't exactly pay for those things. So that's why I asked him for the internal review, so that their stormwater section actually reviewed, but, was it GBI?
Yes. Yep.
Okay. And they went back and forth a couple of times with, so there was sort of
So we're seeing that end product.
Yeah, and I did email you the, sort of the summary of their review.
I did see that,
Okay,
yes.
all right, so I just want to make sure you got that, and just, there was at least some level of, a second set of eyes, I guess.
I'll just also add, Amy, obviously a copy of this notice of intent went to DEP's Northeast Regional Office with the project requiring a water quality cert. There is a specific team at Mass DEP now that deals exclusively with MassDOT projects, so they'll be reviewing that, and they typically take a pretty good look at the stormwater as well. I know that doesn't necessarily.
So Ryan?
Yep, Ryan Hale.
Ryan Hale.
Yes, Ryan Hale, Heidi Davis, and that group. So.
All right, so
Motion to continue 2/4/1907 to February 26th.
Second.
motion is second. Any further discussion? None. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That's unanimous. See you in 2 weeks.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Have a good night. Thank you, Amy. I'll follow up with you.
Okay, sounds good.
Enforcement order violations, Foster Street oil spill update.
So, Clean Harbors has provided us with a memo. You know, they went out there February 7th just to get a look at, you know, existing conditions. It's frozen solid, snow covered with about 8 inches of snow on top. They provided a narrative about the means and methods of what they would do to get out there with equipment, you know, least impactful, as we asked. Basically, they're, you know, they are kind of looking at March timeframe, considering the frozen solid conditions right now. That it, and I don't know. I personally feel like that's sort of reasonable, but you know, we could amend our enforcement order and just shift the completion date to the end of March, but that's something you guys can discuss.
Joey, any thoughts on this?
I took the strict line the last time around because it's a balance of your winter conditions versus spring conditions. If you're looking at vulnerability from a wetlands perspective, oftentimes the frozen ground conditions is the best time to get out there and do it and be done with it. And if something goes wrong, it's frozen, you just pull it out and you're done.
I know.
Something goes awry, assuming you get in there without tracking and mudding and making it a
I
mess.
know.
Something goes awry, when you're in there in a high flow condition.
I know.
Frozen ground's the best time to do
I
it, not
know.
a reason to not do it. And that's where I was the last time around. I think I'm still there. Especially with talking about the degraded boom, it might fall apart. In a frozen ground condition, you can actually hook it and slide it right out.
It's already in pieces, Joe.
Yeah. So I don't see what the advantages are. If they're saying the advantage is because of a concern of it falling apart, I don't see waiting another few months being any benefit. I see it being a disadvantage. That's where I was the last time around, and nothing's changed.
I mean, you know, he did
That's
say.
not true. What we have is an extra 6 inches of frost from the last time we talked about this 2 weeks ago.
So he did say that forecast is calling for sunny or partly sunny weather conditions reaching low 40s from the 24th to the 28th of February.
Yeah, but there's still gonna be snow there, it's not gonna melt.
You know, this may provide a window of opportunity for boom to be removed.
I took a hard line, just like Joe did.
Yeah, I know.
But at the same time, when you go out there right now, the brook is covered under ice.
Yeah.
There's no open water. And there's at least a foot of snow, cumulative, that has to go somewhere before they can get to, unless we could convince them to do it now. But they seem to be resisting frozen conditions work. They don't want to do it then. They want to submit a narrative no later than February 21st. Well, they say, that was us that said that, but
Yeah, I mean, they're saying that, you know, if they do it during frozen conditions, the boom will just get torn up and trapped. Or, you know, you tear it and then you leave whatever's in the ice and then,
yeah, see
I
that.
mean, I guess, I see it from both sides.
Well, that's the problem is because the booms are 2 years old, they're coming apart.
I know.
Ice or no, they're coming apart. So it's part of a self-fulfilling prophecy here. They really can't, I don't think, they can pull them now
Right,
because they're gonna come apart in the ice. They're already breaking up.
right,
They don't have a 2-year shelf life.
right.
So, I don't know. Their proposal is what? What did they propose exactly?
Well, maybe looking at that window between February 24th and the 28th. Alternatively, they're looking into March.
So at the end of the day, and I'm asking this question of everybody here, at the end of the day, what options do we have?
I'm going to defer to your native northerners about what can be done in the snow and ice. To me, it looks like an almost impossible task to get it out, but
if the boom would stay together, it's, Joe's right, it'll come right out. Trouble is, the photo illustrations on page 3 demonstrate that the boom is deteriorating and breaking up in place, because they don't last 2 years. You know?
Yeah, absorbent boom is degrading. I think
In March,
the marine
in
boom
April,
is.
and May, it's only gonna be worse.
It's only,
Just that there's not gonna be any snow there.
it's only gonna get
We're
worse.
not gonna have solid ground to be able to drive out there and do it.
So,
So I think if they got out there and do it, and pull it out, even if it's like a frozen boom is gonna come out in chunks, as opposed to in the springtime when it's thawed, it's gonna come out and spread and disintegrate. At least, I think you can pull it out in chunks, but the problem becomes, if we dictate means and methods, and
Right.
when it goes awry, it's
Right.
our fault.
yeah,
I
so
know,
that's,
I
see,
know.
that's
Let
the,
them do it.
that's the
Let them do
problem.
it the way they wanna do it. We've waited a year and a half of silence to even get them to respond. I think we're making progress.
So I'm inclined to agree with you and say, we want it out. It's your job to get it out. You decide how and when you do it.
The issue is we gave them a deadline.
Right.
So,
So-
we also gave them a deadline to respond, which they've done.
Which they have.
So in response to the deadline, they've given us a proposal.
Yeah.
Okay, just let them know that I think the commission has to accept their proposal and say, we find your proposal acceptable or not. As you say, that way we're not on the hook for it. So I would recommend, this is just my humble opinion, that someone offer a motion to accept the proposal of Clean Harbors for the removal of the boom.
I move that.
Well,
Go ahead.
I just want, yeah,
I have a motion.
Second for
I
comment.
have discussion.
Just note, they did offer that they would take appropriate measures to prevent damage to the upland area if it's not frozen, so I think that's important. Did he propose, I don't see where he proposed a date. We need a deadline for this, is
Yeah,
what
they-
I'm getting at, and
Right.
he's not proposing a deadline,
You're right.
and
On page 3, where they offer their proposal, they don't give you a deadline or a
right,
date.
right.
If not, we anticipate the completion of the project in March.
Where do you see that?
Where is that?
Last paragraph.
Last paragraph?
Yep. They say.
Yeah,
if-
okay. It's the last sentence
So-
of the
so-
last paragraph.
So we don't always get that far. So,
Okay.
so the motion is to accept the proposal. And that's what.
They'll give it a try between the 24th and 28th of February, or at the earliest possible, but no later than
No later than March 31st.
March 30th.
That's what they're saying, which, you know, I think
They say project in March.
that's as reasonable as we can hope to get at this point.
Right.
Do
Okay.
you have any habitat concerns with timing?
March?
That's before
No,
nesting.
there's
That's
no vernal
before
pools.
nesting.
Yeah, before nesting.
The vernal pools are
Yeah, the
downstream.
vernal pools aren't really
Yeah.
in that riverway.
So I can tell you, the vernal pools are not where that is.
Where those
They're
are.
downstream,
Yeah,
past the end of the field where the stream, where the brook enters the woods. That's where the vernal pools
Yeah.
If there's
pools
no
are.
vernal pools
Right.
there, it doesn't matter. Because they're not gonna be up in the brook anyway.
Joe, if the
There's
vernal
fish in the
pools,
brook.
if the vernal pools survived that oil,
We can only be thankful.
nothing's gonna hurt them, if they survive that,
yeah, okay.
you know.
The beavers might not sound the same.
The beavers are untouched. I can assure you of that as well. I just had to spend a little money to get my flow device repaired because they dropped trees on top of it.
In defiance.
So,
So if
we
we
got a
get-
motion and go ahead.
So if we get to the first April meeting, do we turn fines back on relative to April 1st?
I'm gonna be optimistic and say when we get to the first meeting in April, it's gonna be done.
Cool.
We can
Just-
revisit it.
just
And we'll-
me.
I'm just like,
The the enforcement order the amended enforcement order can accept this with the deadline of the 31st of March, and the commission can revisit if that was, if they blew through that deadline, then we can revisit fines. Give give you your discretion to do that.
I'm really hopeful these guys get this done.
Can I just ask, do we have to amend the existing enforcement order, because we did set a deadline?
To accept the proposal submitted February 12th, I guess. When did they submit it?
Today.
10, well, dated the 10th. Oh, wow, two different dates.
Oh, well, yeah,
Yeah, his
I guess
header
they
is
were
dated the
writing it
10th.
and then right,
Scribner's
put the
error.
finishing,
So don't worry about the header, I think
No,
the
put
letter
the-
date is correct.
yes.
Okay, so the motion is to amend the
Amend the
enforcement
enforcement
order
order.
to accept the
Accept
proposal.
the thing with a deadline of 31st, if not earlier.
Incorporate the proposal
Yes,
onto the
yes.
EO.
Yep. And then the discretion to revisit fines if March 31st is not reached.
We'll put this back on the agenda for the first
Yes.
April meeting?
Yes.
Okay. All right, a motion and a second, as described. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That's unanimous.
Okay, great. Okay.
Last but not least, Holt Road. You sat here all this time for Holt Road?
Yeah, I know.
I'm sorry, buddy, I should have taken you out of order, I didn't know.
I apologize for the typo in the subject line. It is Holt Road, not Old Road.
So if I give you 5 minutes, can you do it in 5?
Yes, I bet I can. My name is Ed Van Doren. I work for CDM Smith, and I'm a project manager. We're the consultants for Mass DEP, so they're the project owners. We do the operation maintenance monitoring work for them for the past 10 years or so. In 2003, there was the big washout that occurred. Amy, if you want to show that
Oh, yeah.
photo that shows the rusty water there. So, no, you had
Was
it
it
right
this
there.
one?
Yep, that one, yep. So, that August, I think, timeframe, water washed over the road. This is looking north. And so that's a riprap swale that goes back to the detention basin. So EP has asked us to, do a design and help them, repair that with bigger riprap for bigger storm events now that, with climate change, we would accommodate for that. So when we went to Amy, she pointed out that the order of conditions from around 2000, there's no COC that had been submitted. And so in order to do the NOI for this project, we'd have to close out that earlier order. And so a couple of things. One was we didn't have a as-built plan, so it seems like we're in the same boat as the high school project. So we need a survey as-built. But there was a little wetlands replication area, which, Amy, if you want to show that AECOM plan, which I believe there was some waste there that was needed to be consolidated on top of the landfill. And apparently they thought it'd be a good idea to do some wetlands replication in that area as well, since they were doing the clean out. So Amy asked us to evaluate that replication area, and it turns out that the elevation is too high, that it's not the wetlands that was intended. So our question would be, in lieu of that, go back to that photo with the rusty water there. There's that area to the right, which is to the east. If we could do some kind of native plantings in that area and along the riprap swale in lieu of planting effort, that would be part of our construction project, rather than going back into that wetlands replication area and disturbing that area. So that's really the question, if the commission would consider that in lieu of just going back out to that wetlands replication area.
Joseph, what are you thinking? You and I were on the commission when this project came through.
Yeah, how old we are.
Speak for yourself.
That's right. It's a reasonable request. It seems like the original design kind of created almost like an isolated finger or knob, if you will. Is this going to be something that's parallel to an existing wetland?
Well, there's a pretty big stream that runs through there. It's hard to see on this plan, but to the east between the landfill contours and that wetlands replication area. There's a stream that runs through there, so it would be adjacent to that. But there is a pretty big elevation difference, so it's not going to be right in that stream, but it would be, native plants. The intent would be to try to do something better than just grass seed or something like that, but not to go all the way into the former wetlands replication area and try to restore that to what was apparently intended back in.
And I'm not remembering what it was they were trying to replicate,
Well,
because it should be the same sort of
going to say that, and I
resource.
In looking at the plans, I really couldn't tell where a wetland fill was happening, to be honest with you. I really couldn't detect it. I had no idea. And I don't know if it had something to do with this detention basin up on top, but edge of it was like, I think this is the edge of wetland right
Is that
here,
the
so
top
it's
or-
right next to it. But I don't know if
When you
it's
come
filled.
in Holt Road, it's to your right, and then, it's a capped
Yeah,
landfill.
Yeah,
It
there's
is
a
capped,
parking
right?
area
Yeah,
on top
yeah.
where the recycling
Yeah.
people store their bins.
Yeah.
And then there's the incineration plant behind there.
So it's the area, oh, you weren't here when it was, thing was,
It's immediately on the right as you're going in.
remember the big erosion problem that was in back?
That's
the same-
that was this project.
And what, well, it's the same
Oh, from-
site, but
from
it's a different,
25 years
different
ago,
area.
Or just this recent event?
No, 25 years. They're talking
okay.
a long time ago.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah,
Before my involvement in the project.
Yeah, I guess we are going back pretty far.
The reason why I ask, I'm trying to get the orientation, because it seems like the old landfill was there, there was no wetland ever there, it's not like they filled anything.
Yeah.
They may have, because it's capped, they wouldn't cap it.
Yeah, it's capped. I think the big dig soils
It
went
must be
in
the
there,
toe
and
of the
then
cap
state
must have got
capped
down
it.
into the
Yeah.
perimeter somewhere.
Yes, yep, I believe
And
so.
they couldn't go any further east, I think it's east, maybe south, couldn't go any further south.
Well, the road
because of
is
the brook.
South. The brook is to the east.
Oh, so what, my first
Yeah.
orientation
Yeah.
was correct. They couldn't go any further east because the brook was already there.
Right.
So they may have even gotten a little close to what was BVW,
Yeah,
speculating, parallel to that brook.
Right.
And therefore needed to replicate it, which is why it ended up on the other side. I'm just trying to
Yeah,
guess.
I wonder, because it does say approximate area of waste to be consolidated. That was part of that triangle of area that ended up being the wetlands replication area, but it could be a combination of
You
things.
remember that? I don't remember that kind of detail, you?
No,
And I say that only because as we discuss where to put the replicated area or the restored area, we need to know what it's trying to mimic. What was it that we're trying to
Yes.
mimic?
well, maybe it was.
if you look at the picture, it tells you, you're on the road right here, you're heading down the road.
Yeah, heading
This area
towards-
that you see is on the right-hand side as you enter.
Yeah.
On
Yep.
Clark Road. And the landfill, the old dump, or the capped landfill, call it whatever you want, is on your left going up. It's got monitoring wells, I believe.
Yeah, we monitor the groundwater and the surface water quality and the gas, just
Yeah.
as part of the
And this
regulations.
area down here to the right where the Rusty Brook is, that was the project that came later after the washout.
Yeah, that's not a brook, that's a swale that was constructed.
Yeah,
at the
I
toe of the
realize what
slope.
it's not,
Yeah.
but,
And it leads to the basin.
It does lead to that basin, which part of our effort would be to clean out that basin
Which
and,
it
make
needs
it
attention.
more functional.
so we're talking about the area to the right of the swale, if you're looking at the picture.
Oh, as far as what we want to replicate?
Yeah.
Yes, exactly, yeah.
That
Where
area
you
to
see
the
that
right.
Phragmites?
So,
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
the soil samples reveal no hydric soils? Did you do?
That's correct, in the replication area.
Yeah,
Correct,
that's what- that-
right,
we're-
yeah.
we're talking
There was no attributes apparently of
Yeah.
wetlands. Yeah, that's what those trees are there. That's standing in that area of replication, looking up, what does she say, facing the landfill.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so if there's no hydric soils, what can we
Well, I mean,
mandate?
Well, no, I mean, it was the area that was supposed to be functioning as a wetland, and it's not.
It'd have to be re-excavated and plants
Now,
planted,
if it was,
soils.
if that was sort of a give back because we had this area of solid waste that was a rogue,
Encroached
a
upon the-
rogue,
yeah.
right.
Right.
dumping area or whatever.
Well, it was the town dump.
Right.
That used to
So
be the
maybe
town
that
dump.
area that, I guess it makes a little more sense now that I'm looking at that.
So it looks like what was proposed was wetland restoration, and that's not happened. It's turned into a buffer zone. Well, I don't know how it's functioning now, but it sounds like you're proposing a buffer zone restoration.
Yeah.
I mean,
It
if
would
the
not
soil-
be a
if the-
wetlands, no. It
The
would
soils
be-
are not
It would
there.
be
They don't have
just,
soils. So-
They didn't
an
excavate enough.
improvement.
But not in the replication area
Yeah, to the west,
To the
on
west.
the other side of that street,
on the other side of the street.
right up against near the toe of the landfill. So you saw in that other photo, it had some phragmites, things like
Yeah.
that. So there is some kind of,
Usually a
not really
wetlands,
wetlands, but there is some
Some
kind of,
hydro,
yes.
usually a wetlands replication area extends an existing wetland a certain amount,
Yeah.
as proposed. Is that what was proposed here?
That is the assumption. I wasn't involved in the project.
Is
but
the
that's how it's-
area that's defined on the plan adjacent to an existing wetland?
I would
Not
have to.
really.
I would have to go back and take a look at that. We hadn't considered that.
I'm just going by what we typically
Yeah.
do. We typically don't create a wetland
That's
that's isolated.
isolated by itself.
Yeah, and usually it extends, adds square footage to an existing wetland.
We got another thing at play here, this is probably right up your alley, is we have an approved closure plan, we have a post-closure monitoring program that's prescribed by DEP. And it says what activities you can do and can't do within the perimeter, and if it's a perimeter swale at the bottom, that's to collect runoff from the cap
Yes.
and run it down channels and
That's
get it to the
right. Yes.
basin
Yes.
and channelize it out.
Right.
That's all part of the landfill closure. I don't think we could just randomly allow replication within the limits of the approved landfill closure plan. I think it's contrary to that. I think it has to be
Well,
outside of closure.
We wouldn't do it so it would interfere with the collection of runoff and any of that. It would be, as far as our preliminary designs indicate that we can restore the previous riprap material, use some larger material because the velocities are now higher with the higher storm events. But it would still be a natural environment to the east of the swale before you get to the
Okay, so I'm looking at.
stream, the natural stream.
I'm looking at the full sheet, not the detail that you have there, but in that vicinity right there, within the confines of the site, there's a section that's shown as C 2-9,
Yeah.
just south of the label for energy dissipation.
Oh.
I mean, that's an area that I think was a wetland area.
Yeah.
It looks like it was flagged. I mean, is there anywhere in that area where you could do it adjacent to the wetland and get true wetland restoration and not be part of the cap? Because I'm looking at that heavy dashed line calling limit of phase one final cover. I think that,
Yeah, that was
I
for
think any
construction
restoration with,
purposes.
anywhere in that vicinity is probably gonna fall under the closure plan, and we probably can't tell them to modify anything in there,
Right.
which is probably why restoration was outside there to begin with. So you have a runoff condition, erosion condition resulted from an emergency, a storm event. You need to fix it.
Right.
And you're coming here to get a permit, but you can't get a permit because you don't have the compliance, it's because of the
Right.
restoration.
Yep, that's correct.
So that's why this discussion's even going where it is.
Correct.
I think you can't get emergency certification this far after the fact, so that's not gonna happen. But I think putting the restoration plan as part of this project is probably not the appropriate way to do it. And even if they were done simultaneously, it's probably in the area that we have no jurisdiction to tell them to modify anything.
So let me get a little
nickel tour of what's going on. You guys were around when I was graduated from high school and this came around. So what happened here? It looks like to me that there was dumping where there shouldn't have been. And then they go to file for their cap permit and they realize, all right, we got to move this area on top of the landfill and then we got to fix this area where we were dumping stuff. And it sounds like we've tried to fix this area, but the plants didn't take or something. But the reason we're in this area is because that's where dumping was and we wanted to kind of cover up the problem. So what is the state of the ground out there now?
That picture gives you good,
Those are those photos.
that picture gives you.
Just shows it's a wild, overgrown environment. Yeah.
It's all
So,
over.
I mean, it's just not a wetland. Isn't wild,
It's just not
overgrown kind of back to copacetic for where we were in the beginning?
The rub here is, it was supposed to be a wetland replication area. Okay, it didn't happen. It's not replicating because the soils are not hydric. It's
They
just,
just didn't construct it correctly.
it may have, so
I mean, where are other wetlands here? Do we just tell them to put a wetland replication area in the middle of?
Well,
no, what, the wetlands what was the town dump?
Yeah.
This giant mountain?
Yep.
What the town dump was a swamp. That's why the town dumped there. You dump in the swamp,
Yep.
okay? That's how it was. That's how that was.
Fair enough.
That was business being conducted.
I know.
You put it in the swamp because nothing good can happen in the swamp. You can't build a house there, you can't do anything, so put everything in the swamp.
Dump the stuff you don't want there.
Dump the stuff you don't want, bathtubs, cars, whatever, tractors, everything's in there. If you ever excavated it, you'd be amazed, you might come out with a tank. So, we're confronted now with the problem of we gotta deal with what's happening. And what's happening under the ground there is what it is.
Yes.
They have monitoring wells, they monitor the groundwater. I think that,
I was a landfill engineer in another life, so I'm familiar with what they do out there.
so this area here, I think the question is, I think the question is, do we continue to mandate a wetland replication area, or do we just,
Yeah, that's kind of-
or do we just concede to a different type of restoration?
Yeah.
If the ground is not hydric, and the only way to make it hydric is to excavate and do a whole bunch of invasive work versus natural attenuation, as they like to say, I don't know, I'm kind of the opinion, just let it grow.
Yeah, that's what I was getting at. It's,
Because I really don't think, I don't think that the replication area was in response to a wetland fill that you guys allowed for some reason, because I can't find it on the plan.
just making people make wetlands wetter than they
I mean,
The
maybe it
capping
was
of the
just-
landfill predated this commission.
No, I get it. No, I know. But maybe it was just this
But
area
they
of
came back
dumping.
and did additional capping.
Right.
They capped the landfill, and then this area that's hashed here, that's the heavy grade.
Yeah.
They went and reworked this in 97,
Yeah.
mid-90s. And in doing that, they had to reestablish the cap and extend it. So the toe of this came out to what, in fact, was probably resource areas at the toe.
May have been.
But,
Edge.
but since it's in the capped area, putting a restoration area there now, keep in mind, it's controlled by a post-closure plan, which requires them to mow it and cut vegetation, things that we don't allow. So why are we gonna put restoration there? So I agree, we're not gonna allow it. And I also think that if there is no other location, shrug your shoulders and say, look, a capped landfill's a hell of a lot better than anything ever was out there.
And they've got monitoring wells, which is the key.
That's the majority of us already agreeing on that one. So make a motion.
I don't know, it's just my opinion is just to let it go. But
Can I so move that? How do we
Let's-
officially say let
Well,
it go?
but then, we don't, okay, I think the motion is that we aren't going to hold them to a wetland replication area. We're not gonna make them make it a wetland.
we just make it a no disturb area.
Yeah,
It's a no disturb
yeah.
area. It's a
They're
no-go
not
area.
doing anything with it now.
Can't do anything.
It's not in their footprint of management anyway.
So,
What's before us now, NOI? Or just?
No, it's just, it's a,
I think the interesting is
Discussion
to
item.
give them a friendly enforcement order to restore the erosion and to stabilize it in accordance with design plans, or whatever it is you're submitting, just be silent on the replication area.
I agree.
Don't give them a certificate of compliance, don't give them anything, other than what they're asking for, and it's gonna be in accordance with our order for them to restore it.
And restore it and just stay out of it.
And
Leave it alone.
I think it's the best thing we can do.
Require plantings?
They're already planted, it's already there. It's already planted.
Is that a motion?
Natural vegetation.
Natural,
Yeah,
whatever.
it is naturalized, totally naturalized.
Whatever is willing to grow.
There was a
we should
motion
allow
in there
it to grow.
making it, but I don't think that was actually in the form of a motion.
So moved?
Yeah,
So
so I,
do we want some sort of a game plan from them on how they're gonna fix this erosion area?
well, I think we're there, but rather than having them, it's like the tail wagging the dog here, rather than asking for an NOI to do work, but they can't do that because they don't have a certificate of compliance, because, I think we simply say, much like the other part of the landfill recycle area, fix it.
Fix it.
Fix it.
Because it's not a
Put
good
it, put it the way it's
situation.
supposed to be, tell us how you're gonna do it, we
Yeah.
will give you timeframes of when you're gonna make a proposal, maybe it's this, proposal minus the restoration area.
No, we'd have some design plans.
Yeah.
We'd show the, erosion controls and things like that.
So I think, I call it a friendly enforcement order, because it sounds like that's exactly the way you
That's
wanna
what we
do
would
it
like
anyway.
to have, that's correct, yep.
Okay. So that gives us the mechanism to get it done without having someone go through an NOI and us have to, wink and nod.
Right, so is
Don't
that-
worry about the
Is
compliance.
that a motion? Did you just offer a
I
motion?
just offered it.
Second.
Any further discussion on this motion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right,
Opposed? It's unanimous.
so it's a friendly enforcement order. Give us
to
your
fix
game
it.
plan and your design plans
Right,
on how you're
right,
gonna
and
do
then we
it.
could come before
And we-
you to explain the remediation if you
Yep.
want us to.
This way to,
Do
this
we
way.
want to,
Okay.
do we want to set a date for that?
A
Well, I
report back
can't-
date. I think just a report
I-
back date.
Yeah, so as far as, DEP and their funding, the intent is that we would do the design and prepare a bid package for them this next last two quarters of their fiscal year. And their intent is to do their repairs in the beginning of the next fiscal year. which
So what are
would
you
be,
talking about? How many months?
well,
Realistically.
4 months from now, we'd have the design and the whatever documentation you need. And then the construction would start in July 1st timeframe.
So, pick a date, Joe. September 1st?
I like those, yeah, for it to be complete.
Have it
Well,
completed
No,
by?
I want design plans as soon as they're available.
So when
How's that?
can the design plans be available?
4
Approximately?
months.
4 months?
Let's say by June 30th.
There you go.
That's good.
Beautiful.
Okay. Okay, deliver design plans.
And that was a unanimous vote.
Okay,
All set?
I guess that,
Thank you.
yeah, worth the conversation. None of it which I could have blessed or had the authority
I
to
understand.
allow, so.
Thank you.
Some battles are not worth fighting.
Yeah,
Some battles you just walk away from them
Yeah.
as best you can. This is one of them.
all right, thank you.
Thank you. All right, looking for a motion.
Motion to close the
Motion and a
Second.
second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That's unanimous. We stand closed.